and some rain here in the benches. But our mild winter seems to be continuing, at least for the meantime. Happy Tuesday to you. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. Porter Larson producing the program today behind the glass with a beanie protecting his bald head, because what he does is he grows his hair out for 3 years, then shaves it like a weirdo. Anyway, we have a good guest list today to talk about a bevy of different topics. The Utah Jazz are a topic of conversation nationally today, and I'll be honest, not sure why. I mean, I know why, but to pretend like the 2025-26 Utah Jazz are the first team in pro basketball history to manipulate lineups in the name of results and be unserious about competition is just unbelievably misguided. Like, have you been paying attention? Not for a couple of years, for like 25 years. Okay, we'll get into it on the show. The Jazz accidentally won a basketball game last night. They tried to tank. Will Hardy was asked after the game if he thought about putting Larry Markkinen or Jaren Jackson Jr. back in, and he just said no, flat out. Bam Adebayo after the game said, hey, we probably should, find a way to beat teams that are, trying to lose. But the Jazz accidentally beat the Heat 115-111 last night in South Beach. Back in action against the weirdest basketball team that maybe I've ever seen in the NBA. The Sacramento Kings are in town tomorrow. Not worth your time. If you have tickets, give them away. If you can sell them, good for you. Sacramento is so weird. Like, they actually thought they were making moves to try to be good. They're the worst team in the West this year. I don't know what the Jazz can do to tank this one. They might have to sign some G League guys and let their two-way players play, because Sacramento's horrible. And it's just a weird team. Russell Westbrook, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Domo Sabonis, DeAndre Hunter. Like, you have some names like, oh, those guys aren't bad. They fit horribly together. I haven't seen the line for tomorrow, but my guess is the Jazz are going to be a healthy favorite. Sacramento's lost like 13 straight at this point. So Tankathon 2026 continues. Who had Charlotte and Detroit as the new rivalry in pro basketball? Did you have that on your bingo card? Some grumpy players last night in Charlotte. Pistons are really good, but something like this can absolutely derail a season. The Pistons, of course, historically are known for altercations between themselves, between the other teams, and, sometimes between fans. Every time I see Isaiah Stewart on a highlight, he's running after somebody to try to punch him in the face. That dude's probably about to be suspended for like 10 games. My favorite part of the brouhaha, or we'll pay homage to the former beat writer for the Salt Lake Tribune of the Utah Jazz, as Andy Larson is going to move on to do some other things. We'll call it a kerfuffle. Duncan Robinson, sweet old Duncan Robinson, who isn't, how shall I say, the most intimidating physical presence, was, how shall I say, uninterested to participate in the festivities. He just kind of walked away. But it was pretty chaotic last night. We're going to have some suspensions come down in the world of pro basketball. We saw a really good game at Ball Arena. The Cavs beat the Nuggets. Warriors came back from like 15 at the end to beat the Grizzlies. Stephen Curry will not play in the All-Star game. Brandon Ingram will step in and replace him. And on Peacock last night, the Thunder took care of the Lakers. No SGA, no Luka Doncic, but some good NBA basketball on last night. And tonight, you got a good little tilt as well if you're looking for something to watch in pro basketball. That, like I said, the Jazz are off. Got a little Mavs Suns, Spurs Lakers, Clippers Rockets, Pacers Knicks. The coverage tonight is NBA TV, so that's not great. The world of college basketball locally will kind of unfold tonight with BYU as a slight favorite on the road against Baylor. That's a homecoming for Rob Wright III, who signed a contract to go back to Baylor and then said, $3 million from BYU sounds cool, so I'm going to go ahead and go to Provo. Scott Drew not thrilled about that with his comments. I was in Provo last weekend watching BYU lose to Houston. They're one of the most impressive teams. The two most impressive teams that I've seen so far in college basketball are Houston and Arizona. Michigan is going to be in the mix, but the Runnin' Utes take on the Houston Cougars tonight at 7 o'clock at the Huntsman Center. I'm going to go to that game. Houston, I think, is an 18-point favorite. When Utah played Houston on the road last year with about 6 minutes gone in the first, I think Utah had 8 turnovers and like 2 baskets. Houston is They're really good, man. This is going to be a tough one for Al and the guys. Utah women in action on the road against Arizona State. And the class of the Mountain West Conference, the Utah State Aggies, look to keep their form kind of in place with Fresno up in Logan tonight. But I know what you're excited about. Pitchers and catchers reported today. Did you even know that? Neither did I. I just read it earlier. The offseason storylines in pro football, of course, continue to be of interest now that the Super Bowl is behind us. We're busy. A lot to do on a Tuesday afternoon. Our first guest today will be Tom Haberstroh. Tom's always good to talk about the pulse of the NBA, and we'll talk about the Jazz tanking situation and why all this national attention suddenly is honed in on Salt Lake and the Utah Jazz. Tony Parks, I believe live in studio, ? TP will stop by today. I always enjoy my conversations with Tony. And then the second half of the show, we'll do some college and pro football with Max Brown and some Utah football and basketball with Bill Riley. Tom Haberstroh, Tony Parks, Max Brown, Bill Riley. In there, the Duncan Robinson of Sports Talk Radio producers, Porter Larson. Did you see the video of the fight last night?
I did.
My favorite part was Duncan Robinson, wanting absolutely no part of that.
So what are you implying there?
That I think if suddenly we got in a brawl, I think you would walk away. I don't think you'd get my back.
Yeah, I guess who initiates the brawl is definitely part of it. I'm not just going to get into a brouhaha for nothing.
Wait, what if the host of the radio program you produce is in a brouhaha? You won't get my back?
I mean, sometimes, I don't know, maybe you might be instigating.
Doesn't matter. If we're teammates, you get my back.
Not so sure.
See, you are the Duncan Robinson of this show.
I'm not. Now, let me be clear. I'm not opposed to a brouhaha. I've been thrown out of many basketball games, including one for a punch that I may have thrown.
So, you're saying if I was involved, you wouldn't get my back?
I'm not saying that.
It feels like you're saying that.
It's case-by-case basis.
All right, okay. Tell me why every time I see an Isaiah Stewart highlight, he's running after somebody to punch him in the face.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a guy who apparently is not afraid to do that and doesn't really care the situation. But, it does seem like that's the main part of his career, at least as national media or national stories pick up on. Maybe go for some other highlights.
Speaking of fights, playing hurt today. I got in a fight with Sean's dog Rocky, and Rocky won.
I heard
he clawed me in the mouth, so a little lip blood, but we're making it through. Real quick before we get to opening tip, why do you think suddenly the national media on the NBA side of things is simply zeroing in on the Utah Jazz this year as if they're the only team to ever do this?
The way it looks. And here's the deal. I kind of applaud the Jazz for not trying to be cute about it. That's, usually if you play it cutesy, if you tiptoe around it, the NBA will pretend like they're not seeing it. They'll do the Sandra Bullock, with the blindfold that she could just take off at any time. But when you're doing it in a certain way, which is literally playing your best players up until the start of the fourth quarter, it's so obvious, it's so upfront. And then you ask the head coach after the game, and he says, no, we're not going to play him. I think the fact that the Jazz have not tried to hide it in that way is maybe why people are catching on to it. But like you said, it doesn't really make it different to me. My thing is I kind of respect it in a way where you're just doing what the NBA is incentivizing, and you're not doing it in a way that's saying, hey, we're injured. No, we're just, showing you what our goal is, which is to retain a top 8 draft pick in 2026.
Yeah, we'll get into it. We got some good guests today. U.S.-Canada women's hockey. Let's see. The women's hockey team just scored their 5th goal. USA 5, Canada 0 with 8 minutes left in the third. All right, Tom Haberstroh, first guest today on a Tuesday afternoon. But before Tom stops by, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends at Prize Picks, it's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 with Prize Picks.
The first thing you need to know is Prize Picks is available and legal here in Utah. Okay, you can shoot your shot on Prize Picks and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks now giving you $50 in lineups when you sign up and play your first $5. Prize Picks makes every dunk, every dime, and every board that much more exciting, so don't miss your chance and get started On America's #1 app for sports picks. New feature alert, Prize Picks now has early payouts. If your player gets off to a hot start, you now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup, because on Prize Picks, it is good to be right. The Jazz accidentally won a basketball game last night. They accidentally beat the Miami Heat 115-111. The Heat were actually trying to win the game. Miami's not great this year, but they're mid-table in the East. And the Jazz accidentally won. I'm sure Bryce Sensabaugh was punished harshly after the game for his shot making down the stretch. Will Hardy, after the game, was asked by a media member if he considered putting Lauri Markkanen or Jaren Jackson Jr. back in the game, to which he said no. In 25 minutes of play, Lauri had 17 points and 8 boards. In 25 minutes of play, Jaren Jackson Jr. looked awesome, 22 points, 5 rebounds. And then gastric distress set in, and they sat on the bench for the fourth quarter. And I'm watching as Miami is making the run, and it looked like they were going to win, but Bryce Sensabaugh decided to make some shots. And Bam Adebayo, after the game, said, look, we probably should find a way to beat teams who are, not trying to win. Now, ultimately, over the past couple of weeks, the national NBA media landscape, for whatever reason, has turned their ire to this iteration of the Utah Jazz. And a couple of things here. It is frustrating to watch as a fan if your only goal is to watch your team and make sure that they are serious about competing. There is a lack of integrity with this endeavor. I'm not going to argue any of that, but I'll continue to harp on this. This is the incentive structure of pro basketball, and it's what is necessary, especially if your roster construction takes place in a city like Salt Lake. Now, the narrative that the Jazz have never signed free agency is not correct, but the narrative that it's problematic oftentimes for the Jazz to compete, certainly in the modern day, with some of the cities that are more attractive or the markets where NBA players want to live is completely correct, right? So, ultimately, a draft asset, like a top 8 protected draft pick, specifically in a draft cycle that seems to contain at least 3, if not more, generationally special pieces, you have to maintain it. You just do. Okay, and this rebuild. So we are now inching towards the end of what has been, by pretty much any metric, the worst 4-year stretch of Jazz basketball in the history of the organization. In 50-plus years, the last 4 years have been absolutely pathetic, juxtaposed to what we're used to here in Salt Lake City watching our pro basketball team. I'm not going to run from that. And I think there are a lot of things you could point to. I think there have been some bad decisions. They haven't drafted very well. Development, I think, is still a question. I think Will Hardy has shown his ability to develop with a couple of success stories, namely Walker Kessler, who unfortunately is hurt, and, of course, Keontae George, who has been really good this year. There are other players that have not developed under Will, okay? And so is that the coach's fault? Is that the player's fault? Is that the culture fault? Is it the process fault? I don't know. I thought Filipowski was going to be better this year. Taylor Hendricks has been traded. Cody Williams might be in the G League or Europe as soon as next year. But you do have a couple of success stories in Walker Kessler and Keontae George. You add in Lauri Markkanen, who's had the best stretch of his pro career here in Salt Lake under Will, and I think a really good trade made by Austin Ainge in the front office to bring in Jaren Jackson Jr., who at the age of 26 is a 2-time All-Star and a former Defensive Player of the Year. You got something now, okay? The picture is crystallizing. And the puzzle is almost complete in order to be front-facing and serious about competing next year. But there really is one more piece of that puzzle as far as, a baseline for something that's serious next year. And the final piece of that puzzle could come in the form of a top 2 draft pick with a wing and a playmaker like Darren Peterson, or a wing and a playmaker like A.J. DeBonson. Now, the question's about Darren Peterson, simply whether or not he wants to show up and play. Kansas actually beat Arizona last night. It was a real high-level college basketball game. But the word is Darren Peterson practiced and was set to play and then decided right before the game he didn't feel well. And the rumor is Bill Self was frustrated. There was a screenshot of a staffer on Kansas that was sending out some text messages. Basically said that Bill Self was communicating to Darren Peterson, look, if you're going to play, we need all of you. You got to be all in. And he said, F it, I'm out. So are there some attitude issues with Darren Peterson? I don't know. When you watch him play, the talent is just intoxicating. And I think he has a shot to be a star. Jazz, add Darren Peterson or A.J. DeBonsa to this group, and you are cooking with gas, okay? As I've said over and over and over, there still is one piece of this puzzle that has to fall into place. But now the team, as far as the vision of the front office, is starting to crystallize. You can see it. And over the past couple of games in truncated spaces, for two players that haven't played together or don't know each other very well, the Lauri Markkanen Jr., Jaren Jackson Jr., the Lauri Markkanen, no junior. He's the only one. Not in the world. I'm sure there are others. The Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr. partnership over the course of the last two games in limited spaces has looked awesome. That's a great sign. But I understand the frustration of people that are watching a team that isn't playing with integrity and watching a coach that is now completely honest and front-facing about manipulating lineups in the name of draft capital, and they will be fined. I mean, I'm anticipating, maybe before we get off air, the NBA fining the Utah Jazz. And maybe multiple times. But I don't know why all the attention is on the Jazz. The Washington Wizards traded for Trae Young and Anthony Davis. And my guess is we're not going to see much of those two this year at all. I mean, maybe limited capacity, but they're not going to play much. And would you like to know why? Washington has a top 8 protected draft pick this year, just like the Utah Jazz. And just like the Utah Jazz, they made not just one trade, but 2 trades to add really good pieces to their puzzle. But they're not going to play their way in to a scenario where they're going to lose their pick because they understand how important it is for them. Washington, kind of like Salt Lake City, is not a organization that, historically speaking, has signed a ton of good free agents. They've won 14 games on the year, and they're second to last in the East, and they're right now, I think, third in the draft standings. And the Jazz right now are 6th. Okay, Indiana, Washington, Brooklyn, Sacramento, and the Pelicans are all, I'm going to say, ahead of the Jazz in this tank race 2026. The Jazz are in danger of being in this zone where they could lose the asset. So for anybody that's frustrated about the way the Jazz have handled this, my question to you is this. Would you like to see the Jazz go all in on competing, win 29 games, and have the 9th pick in the draft, and therefore give that draft asset to Oklahoma City? Is that what you would really like? Because I understand your point about competing and integrity, but in the name of a rebuild in Salt Lake City, this is an asset you just have to keep. Finally, for anyone out there that for whatever reason believes that the Jazz are the first team to do this, not only are the Jazz not the first team to do this recently, this started a long, long time ago. Let me introduce you to a player named David Robinson, kids. For you youngsters, you can YouTube David Robinson. He was a great player for the San Antonio Spurs, went to the Naval Academy, served in the Navy for a couple of years. The Spurs picked him number 1 overall in the 1988 draft cycle. David Robinson, much like John and Karl Malone, took tremendous pride in playing as many games as he possibly could. It is a era it's a bygone era. Once upon a time, players actually tried to play games. Players actually showed up for their jobs. And sometimes, even if they were nursing some injuries, they showed up and tried to play all 82 games. Now, obviously, that doesn't happen anymore, and my frustrations with that are well documented. The following is a list of the number of games that David Robinson played in the first, 8 years of his career. Remember, there are 82 games in the NBA regular season. 82, 82, 68, 82, 80, 81, 82. And in 1996, 1997, David Robinson played in 6 basketball games. As the story goes, and I wasn't in San Antonio's training room, so I can't corroborate this entirely, David Robinson had an injury. He had an injury that was going to keep him out for a few weeks. And David Robinson in 1996, 1997, after a few weeks, came to the Spurs and said, hey, I'm good. I'm ready to go. Back feels better. And they said, your back is still bad, pal. You're not ready to go. Go home and watch college basketball and watch the player who is a senior this year playing for Wake Forest. His name is Tim Duncan. And we think if we can grab him and put him next to you, it will work really well. The Boston Celtics famously tried to do the same thing that year. It was Rick Pitino's Boston Celtics, and they thought they were going to get Tim Duncan, like everybody else, and that would change the course of their organization. So David Robinson, who took a lot of pride in playing 82 games, was told that he was not healthy and to go home in the hopes of San Antonio lucking into the number 1 overall pick, which they did. And they drafted Tim Duncan. 2 years later, the Spurs won a championship with Tim Duncan and David Robinson. The Boston Celtics had 2 bites at the apple that year, but they weren't able to get the number 1 overall pick. They had 3 and they had 6. They drafted Chauncey Billups and Ron Mercer, and Rick Pitino was out of a job 2 years later. This is not new, and it's not recent. This has been happening in pro basketball for 20 or 30 years. So I don't understand why everybody is taking this out on the Utah Jazz. But we've got a good guest coming up on the other side to break all this down. Tom Haberstroh, right out of the gates on a Tuesday afternoon. So keep it here on ESPN 700. Jazz accidentally won a basketball game last night. They're off tonight. We'll see how they can lose to the Sacramento Kings tomorrow. Potentially the weirdest NBA team I've ever seen. Our next guest is good to always join us and help us understand exactly why the Utah Jazz are losing basketball games on purpose. Tom Haberstroh, Tuesday afternoon. Hello, Tom. How are you, buddy?
Man, I just had to laugh. If you're already just confused, I'm just glad that we're in the same space. Because I watched that trade deadline and was still trying to figure out, and I think I still am trying to figure out the plan there in Utah. But we'll unpack it. And I just want to say, I'm very rarely am going to be introduced to Satellite by Dave, and I feel like I just want to give you a shout out, and to you and Porter for bringing me in on such an epic song from my childhood.
It's very rare I can bring in a fellow Northeast Dave head, Tom, so I like to pay homage because he deserves it. But look, I don't really understand, and maybe you can help me understand this. It seems like the national NBA media has, for whatever reason, turned their focus to just basically call out the Jazz for what they're doing. Now, what the Jazz are doing it's very blatant. Will Hardy was even asked last night, like, hey, did you think about putting Lauri Markkanen back in or Jaren Jackson Jr.? And he was like, no. My guess is they're going to get fined, but it certainly feels like a lot of people have honed in on the Jazz specifically. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think because they just traded for a really good player in Jaren Jackson Jr., and they have a top 8 protected pick. This isn't like they have a first-round pick and that's it this year. It's top 8 protected. And when you look at the data of the chances of losing that pick if they're just a little too good are pretty good. Like when you look at the numbers, I have it here. Right now, the Jazz are in the 6th slot in the draft lottery, meaning they have the 6th best odds of getting the number 1 overall pick. And that's important in the Jazz context because their first-round pick is top 8 protected. And if it falls outside of 8 on draft lotto night, they lose that pick. And so what are the odds that they lose that pick? Well, right at number 6 slot where they're currently at, they have a 96% chance of keeping it. Okay, so just a 4% chance of losing it. But if they drop in the standings, meaning they win a few games and suddenly Milwaukee or Dallas or Memphis jumps them in the draft lotto standings, they go from 96% of keeping it to 86% to keeping it. And then if they're in the number 8 slot, they're a 58% chance of keeping it, basically a coin flip. Even if they're in the 8th slot and it's a top 8 protected pick, it's basically a coin flip at that point, whether they lose that pick in the A.J. Debonsa draft or they get to keep it and have a shot at Darren Peterson, A.J. Debonsa, Caleb Wilson, and Cam Boozer. And then if they win a little bit more and suddenly Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lauri Markkanen are like the next John Stockton and Karl Malone together, if they fall to number 9 in the standings, in the draft lotto standings, their odds of keeping the pick are at just 23%. Okay, so this is where I'm sitting here and wondering how Will Hardy is going to pull this off, because Jaren Jackson Jr. is too good to keep off of the floor and the NBA not to look at this. However, if I'm Danny Ainge and Austin Ainge and Zanuck and Will Hardy and Ryan Smith, I would just say, hey, you know that team north of the border, the Toronto Raptors? They did this exact thing last year, and they did not get fined. Meaning, Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, R.J. Barrett, and Jakob Poeltl were all rested, DNP rests. They were not necessarily dealing with injuries, and they were having those DNP rest games. And secondly, Scotty Barnes was quiet quitting in the middle of the game, just like Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. What I mean by that is the Raptors would play those guys, and then they would bench them in the fourth quarter when things got close, and that they wanted to make sure that they clinched a loss in that game, and they took their best players off the floor. And Scotty Barnes would play those games, an all-star Scotty Barnes, and then come off the floor in winning time, because they needed it to be losing time. And so they didn't get reprimanded. They also didn't get reprimanded for sitting Brandon Ingram for the rest of the season after they traded him they traded for him from New Orleans with an ankle injury that didn't seem like it was season-ending, and then suddenly it looked like it was trending towards season-ending, and he didn't play a single game because they were trying to maximize their draft lottery balls. And this is what Utah can point to and say, hey, if that was good by then, why is it not okay for us to do the same thing? They were trying to get Cooper Flagg. They ended up not getting Cooper Flagg, but still the process is the same mentality. And so for Utah, maybe the NBA comes down and drops the hammer on Utah for what they're doing right here. But we saw Anthony Davis do it in New Orleans. We saw Scotty Barnes do it last year for the Toronto Raptors. And if I'm Utah, I can just point to that precedent and said, you allow that to happen. How are you not allowing us to do the same thing?
Yeah, and, we could even go a little bit deeper because the Jazz aren't alone in doing this year, Tom. I mean, and every team goes about this differently, and I will admit the Jazz are being very blatant about it and almost defiant about it. Like, look, I like Will. I think that was a little bit of a misstep last night because I do think they're going to get fined. But you reference Anthony Davis, Washington trades for Trae Young and AD, and I'm not in their training room. I don't know how healthy they are, but my guess is we don't see them at all this year. And guess what? Washington has a top 8 protected pick. And by my estimation, I think Milwaukee's probably going to join in. Brooklyn, I mentioned Washington, Indiana. The Kings are the weirdest team I think I've ever seen. I don't think they're trying to join this group. I just don't think they have a choice because they're so bad. The Pelicans, the Mavericks, the Grizzlies, I think we're seeing, and you would know this because you're with them, we're seeing some growth from Portland. I thought they might join this list, but there's probably 10 teams, Tom, in my opinion, that are unserious about competing over the final, 25 games of the season or whatever. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I just wrote about this for TomTheFinder.com. It's my Substack. Go subscribe, TomTheFinder.com, if you want my weekly title tiers, my weekly rankings of the title contenders. And I talked about this very thing, is I counted 10 teams that I think are going to try to lose as many games as possible going forward. And that, I think, is an unprecedented number. The NBA used to be a race to the bottom for like 2 or 3 teams, right? You remember like when the draft lottery odds were at 25% for the team that has the worst record, and you would see some egregious tanking there in the last 5-10 games of the season. Well, by flattening the lottery odds, it's no longer a race to the bottom, but you're actually opening up the race to more people. It's a wider race now. And so come February, not even February, I think teams were trying to figure this out as recently as January, whether they were going to be buyers or sellers, and therefore trying to lose the rest of their games in January. And last year when Scotty Barnes was doing this and the Toronto Raptors were doing this at the end of March, it's now accelerated in this draft class is so good that teams are having to do this now because they got to pile up as many losses. And you're seeing, I think, 10 teams, right? So Chicago, I think, is in this group. I think the Clippers are in this group. Otherwise, I don't see why they trade Zubats. And for a guy, Darius Garland, who might not play for them or consistently because he's got foot problems. And I also think that Milwaukee's in here, Memphis, Dallas, Utah, Brooklyn. It's 10 teams. And so that's a lot of losses to compete with. And so I think you're going to see at the first sign of Jaren Jackson Jr. having any sort of limp or his hand hurts or any sort of injury that Markkanen, I think they're going to try to have some chemistry with him, get some games together, see what they have. And right now they're really good when they're on the floor. They seem to be really compatible as players. And I think it might be a situation where give it a week, but I think they're going to join Trae Young and Anthony Davis at some point in trying to ensure that they're healthy and that you don't risk catastrophic injury or a bit major injury here down the stretch. Because we've seen that happen before in the NBA, and it's horrible. I mean, I do work for the Blazers, and Damian Lillard, the whole trajectory of the Milwaukee Bucks and the Portland Trail Blazers changed in that postseason series, and everything changed with one injury. And so I think when you look at the Jazz situation, it might behoove them to get on with this tank sooner than later because there are other teams in this mix, and the tank-a-palooza that we're seeing down the stretch, unprecedented in my opinion, the breadth of tanking, not necessarily the depth of tanking, because we've seen some teams pull the ripcord at the end of the season. It's the breadth. It's a third of the NBA that are apparently trying to lose as many games going forward because this draft is that deep and this draft is that good. And I think that the Utah Jazz, by getting Jaren Jackson Jr. and setting themselves up for next season, I think they want to keep that top 8 protected pick in more ways than one. I think it's a great loaded draft, but A.J. Debonsa is a guy that I think they don't want to miss out on just because they were too good, which is why I thought this trade was so confusing, because in any year I could understand that they might want Jaren Jackson Jr. for that, as Brian Windhorst called it, the flip, is you flip the switch in the offseason to go from tanking to contending or trying to win. And by getting a Jaren Jackson Jr. in any other draft would make some sense. But in the A.J. Debonsa draft, I feel like that is the one you do not, in the Victor Wembanyama draft, is you do not want to get good because you might lose an opportunity to potentially have that franchise cornerstone.
But the points that you're making, Tom, are exactly why I anticipated something like this happening. I mean, after the trade went down, I did a bunch of different radio hits, did a couple of TV hits, and everyone said, well, are they too good to keep the pick now? And I said, probably on paper, but Jaren Jackson Jr. is about to fly into Salt Lake to find out he has a bad back. Like, I agree with the premise that the deal they made them too good on paper to hold on to the asset, but because of that very dynamic, I completely anticipated them manipulating their lineups or holding players out, right? Like, do you think people were expecting them to go, like, front foot, like, let's go all in on competing? Because I certainly wasn't.
Well, I mean, what's so funny about this is the Washington Wizards, when they got Trae Young, people were like, oh, he's going to be so good for Alex Sarr, and this is going to be great for the development of their young guys, and I can't wait to watch him play because he's a great distributor and a great shooter and one of the best passers in the league. And I'm like, in what world do you think the Washington Wizards are going to play Trae Young at any point this season? There's no way.
Right.
And the same thing with the Anthony Davis is people are all excited and how, they're actually going for it. They're accelerating this timeline because they couldn't handle all the losing, and it was poisonous in the locker room and all this stuff on the expectations that they were going to trade for these guys and play them right away. And I'm like, did you see what Brandon Ingram, that trade happened last year? What happened there? Did you see how in the Anthony Davis situation from the New Orleans Pelicans is how they played him when he didn't want to be there? They forced him to be playing, but then they took him out after 3 quarters. And the precedent is there. The New Orleans Pelicans proved that this is acceptable practices, is if you don't want to play a guy in winning time, that's okay. Just you got to play him. And eventually they shut him down. But I do think that fans are very confused right now and have every right to be confused that they don't know whether to cheer when they get a good player or not, because they don't know if they actually are going to play for your team. And I think this is where, if you really want to go radical with this, and I know, Spence, you're always there to go off the wall, kind of radical on the NBA, is if you really want to fix tanking, you need to get rid of the draft. You can't do this whole lotto protection. Oh, we're going to freeze the draft lottery odds after March 1st. These provisions are halfway measures, and teams will figure out a way to just accelerate their tanking earlier in the season, or they'll tank in certain ways at certain parts of the season. I don't think any of the lotto fixes that I've seen make any sense, and I think tanking will always be here as long as there is a draft. And the answer, I think, is if you do it like college basketball, Spence, where you might have an advantage on getting a guy because you can offer him more money, but you can recruit a guy to BYU. You can recruit a guy to Lawrence, Kansas. You can recruit a guy to Lexington, Kentucky, right? How are these powerhouses able to sign the top prospects? We're not hearing about small market disadvantages when it comes to college programs. I don't think that you would hear it either if in the NBA, instead of you automatically getting to select number 1 draft pick, you just get a salary exception. You get to offer a guy more money. Now, you're still in Sacramento. You're still in Charlotte. You're still in Utah, but you have an advantage, a monetary financial advantage to offer incoming guys like A.J. Debonta and Darren Peterson. And we've seen at the college level that top prospects, the top talents, will go to small markets in the right situations. If you can prove that your program's good and you have real professional coaching staff and facilities, you can do this. But the NBA, I think, looks at the draft as too much of a tentpole, too much of an entertainment product to get rid of that. But I would counter, signing day is really fun. Free agency is really fun. And those sports that do those things don't seem to have any problem about having people engaged in a product. And I think the NBA is just, with the draft, they're incentivized to maintain this system. And the Utah Jazz are just playing by the system. And I just don't know. I don't know how, if you're the front office or Will Hardy, how you don't utilize all of the ways, all the levers you can pull to make sure that you skirt the system here.
Huh. I'm going to have to let that one resonate. I mean, it's radical, but you have to change the incentive structure. You've been saying it for years. Look, I know you got to go. So you can take 30 seconds with this if you want before I say you lose, because you referenced in 2 games for players that haven't practiced together, Market and Jaren Jackson Jr. look awesome. Orlando, 27 for Lowry, 27 minutes, 22 points for Jaren Jackson Jr. in 25 minutes. And then last night, 17 for Lowry, 22 for Jaren, 25 minutes, 25 minutes. So tell me what you have seen there. Why is it working so well? And if the Jazz can add one more piece to this puzzle via a top 3 pick, what do you think next year could look like?
I think they could be in the playoff picture next year, especially with Walker Kessler. I mean, if you look at Walker Kessler lineups with Lowry historically, and even this season in the short time they were together, or the Lowry Markkanen minutes with Jaren Jackson Jr., it's very positive, very good minutes, and the scoreboard is very positive when those guys are on the floor. And I think with Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lowry Markkanen, they're very skilled guys. They can do a lot of things offensively. They're very interchangeable. And I think Will Hardy finally has a guy in Jaren Jackson Jr. that can play defense too, and can play multiple positions defensively and guard 1 through 5 if asked to do that. So with, I think, Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor with Lowry Markkanen, the defensive rating for the Utah Jazz is like 98. Below 100, meaning they're holding opponents to under 100 points every 100 possessions. And when they're not on the floor, it's more like 125, right? I mean, if they get those guys healthy, Keontae, Lowry, Walker, and Jaren Jackson Jr., and they play 70 games together next year, that's a playoff team. They're that good. And I think Will Hardy will finally be able to play with some real top-notch ingredients. And I think he's good enough as a chef to get a winning team. It's just whether those ingredients are finally top-notch caliber. And I think they can do that if they're healthy next year.
Tom, you're the man. Appreciate the time. Be good. Have a good week. We'll chat soon, okay?
You got it, Spence.
Great Tom Haberstroh. Good stuff there. Go to tomthefinder.com. All right, before we catch a break, going to bring in Tony Parks coming up on the other side. We got a brand new client on the radio station, and I'm pumped about it because I work with them personally and have worked with them for a couple of years. So it's now February, breaking news, and the way calendars work, there are 10 months left in the year-ish, to about 10 and a half months. So this offer the Game Day Men's Health is giving you, you got to capitalize on it now because you're going to save all year long. Now, did you set a resolution to start the year where you wanted to get back into shape? Or maybe you wanted to lose a little weight, or maybe you need to lose a lot of weight because your health is kind of in danger. Well, as you age, it's harder to get back into shape and maintain it. So I set a goal a couple of years ago, wanting to get into the best shape I've ever been in as an adult. It's like, I'm finally going to do this, okay? So started eating really clean, started working out every day. And then within a couple of months, I just wasn't seeing a lot of progress, and I was frustrated. So I had a friend ask me if I'd ever supplemented testosterone before, which I had not. So he recommended Game Day Men's Health. And here's what happened. And this is the exact deal they're giving you, by the way. They give you the same deal that they give me. So I went in, they gave me a free consultation, and that's just a little bit of blood work over just a couple of minutes. Then they sit with you, and they go over your results, and they talk about your levels. They tell you where you're doing well, and then they look at areas where you might be a little bit deficient and say, we have these products that can help you out with this. So I utilized their testosterone therapy and some of their peptides, and within about 3 months doing this, in addition to, of course, working out and eating clean, The progress I saw was 10 times what I had seen without using their products. Okay. And the best part is 2 years later, I've maintained it because you go in every 3 months for a checkup and a consult, and they take your blood and they track how you're doing. And my testosterone levels have been through the roof now for a couple of years. And I can tell you that I'm in the best shape I've ever been in as an adult and have been for a couple of years. So if you're looking to do this, I can just tell you that it works. And the deal they're giving you makes it extremely affordable. So number one, that free consultation. But number two is 50% off the entire year. That's why I brought up the fact that it's so early. You get 50% off the rest of the year. So get in, do it now. You probably heard me talking about it, but don't waste time. Go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com right now. GameDayMen'sHealth.com. They have locations in Lehigh, Pleasant Grove. The one at Cottonwood Heights is the one I use. Then there's one in South Ogden. And when you book your consultation, just make sure you tell them that you heard me talking about it. Just say, hey, I heard Spence talking about this on his show. So they'll give you that consultation for free and then give you 50% off. Same deal they give me the rest of the year. GameDayMen'sHealth.com. All right, 1 hour down, 2 hours to go. Tony Parks joins us coming up on the other side here on ESPN 700. All right, on an empty stomach, okay? You're as hungry as you can possibly be. How many, now this is important, how many perfectly timed Uncrustables do you think you could put down on an empty stomach?
Whew. Man, that's a good question.
I timed mine today perfectly. I just had it during the break, and I'm thinking like I could probably smash 5 more of these right now.
I was going to say a half dozen or more.
Now, the problem is, like, the bread, of course, is problematic. You might get full, but, hey, those guys eat how many hot dogs? Like 200 or whatever?
Yeah, not going to feel great afterwards, but I could put down a bunch of those. I'm going to say 8.
8 Uncrustables. I like it. Highlight of my day. The other highlight of my day is our next guest, who I'm not looking at in the studio, which hurts my feelings, but he is Tony Parks on a Tuesday afternoon. What's up, TP? How are you, man?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. I think I'd throw down 6 of those, by the way.
Okay.
Comfortably. And then if I was just bored, I don't know. I don't want to know what the number might be. Probably too many, more than I should. But I think that's interesting when you talk empty stomach. That can be a dangerous situation.
See, the key is the key is the timing. What I've discovered, about 45 minutes out of the freezer, Tony, is like the perfect time for an Uncrustable.
Yeah. Yes. Having a toddler, you learn the very specific details on every minute and how much it matters. And something like that goes right into what you're talking about. So I'm right there with you, man. Yeah, 45 out of the freezer. That's the number.
All right, Tom, let's get into it. It's been kind of weird that the Utah Jazz are suddenly like catching strays, as the kids would say, from the national NBA media. And look, they are being very unserious about competing, and they've been unserious about competing for a number of years. This is the worst 4-year stretch of Jazz basketball we've ever had. Nobody's arguing that. And last night, Will Hardy was asked after accidentally beating the Miami Heat, did you think about putting Jaren Jackson Jr. or Larry Marketing in? And Will said no, right? Like, I'm anticipating a fine. I think it's going to happen. But we just had Tom Haberstroh on, and by our estimation, there are 10 teams in the NBA right now that are unserious about competing. Why do you think the Jazz seem to be the team right now that everybody's honing in on?
I think it's just because you can clearly see the incentive with the additional pick there, with the number 8, top 8 protected pick on top of that, with the fact that the previous 3 years, obviously, they've not been very good. And people can just see it. You can see right through it. And so, but every time I see something like this, I go, look, people are going to do what you incentivize them to do. And if you don't want teams tanking, you got to stop incentivizing them. And you and I talked about it, early in the season with Walker Kessler's injury and all that. And we're talking about how, big picture, you sit him out the rest of the year. You don't even think about bringing him back. You let this be that season where your top 8 pick gets protected, and you do everything you can to plan for the future. And I think you made a great point when you said, if you want to, this team can go all in on a, 30-win season, if you really want them to do that. But right now, the NBA, and they still have not been able to come up with an idea or an answer to fix it. But human behavior is human behavior. You reward it, the behavior goes up. You don't reward it, the behavior goes down. That's as plain and simple as it can be. And in competition, it's like in competition, however you set it up, people are going to adapt and respond to those rules and the way that they're put together. And some are exceptional at it, and some are bad at it. But you brought up the Tim Duncan story from back in the day with San Antonio. It was blatant. It was obvious. But it was, in their eyes, the best way to be able to pave a way forward for success, and it paid off. And the Jazz obviously are trying to do the same thing right now.
So, the other narrative that I'd like to dispel, because the Jazz certainly aren't the only team this year that is doing what they're doing. As I said, I think there are probably 10. But this also isn't something that's happened over the past couple of years. And for our younger listeners out there, I will introduce you to a player named David Robinson, who once upon a time was an unbelievable center for the San Antonio Spurs. And like John and Carl, David Robinson took a lot of pride in trying to play 82 games. Is that a thing anymore? Absolutely not. Do I have a problem with it? Absolutely. I've talked about it for years. Here are the amount of games that David Robinson played to start his career. 82, 82, 68, 82, 80, 81, 82. And in 1996-97, David Robinson played 6 basketball games. That same year, there was a center who played for Wake Forest named Tim Duncan. And as the story goes, David Robinson was rehabbing an injury and came back to the Spurs and said, I'm ready to play. And they said, no, you're not. You're going to sit all year long and go watch this kid at Wake Forest. And as history showed, San Antonio gets number 1. They draft Tim Duncan. 2 years later, they win a championship with Duncan and Robinson. And then for 20 years, San Antonio was one of the elite teams in basketball, winning multiple championships. Like, it's not just that the Jazz are not only doing it now. It's not only that the Jazz have company. It's that this has been happening for literally 30 years in one way or another.
Right. And that's been the story of the league. I mean, to your point, if you did see, in my opinion, if you want to criticize the Jazz, you're critical of what the previous 3 years were. Like what they're doing now, it's like, well, yes, you should be protecting that pick. You should be doing what you can to develop players. But if you go all in and find yourself right there in the middle, you're going to have a really tough time taking major strides going forward because of the dynamics of the league, like you have laid out perfectly and all of that. But the previous 3 years, what I won't hear from anybody is how the previous 3 years helped set this up, because it didn't. The previous 3 years, I don't care whatever you want to blame it on, those years are inexcusable, unnecessary, and indefensible. Now you actually see a picture where they bring in a guy that can fit what they want defensively and overall culturally and overall in terms of the mindset shift of the team going forward, big picture. But what you can't do is win too much, lose some of those key assets, and then end up having that hampering what you're trying to do for the long-term vision. And you hate that it ends up being the reality. You hate that this is the way the NBA works, but it is. And back to your Tim Duncan thing real quick, when you talk, 1999 San Antonio Spurs, the resting, we talked about like how key it was to rest a guy like David Robinson, who obviously helped get them that pick. The Spurs would then be one of those teams that got into key moments of resting players for the long haul, something that Jeff Hornacek had mentioned to me that had the 99 Jazz done that, they probably could have won the NBA championship instead of hitting the wall the way that they did during that playoff run. So there's an amazing amount of ways things have happened in the NBA, and you can see the strategies that are put together. The conversations go on forever. And my thing has always been, anytime somebody complains to me about it, I go, well, you got to change it. You got to change it. It's like college football for the longest time. They would do this. And I'm like, well, until you change this, teams are going to keep, either scheduling poor non-conferences, or teams are going to keep doing things a certain way, just like it is with NIL and something like the transfer portal right now, right? So the NBA has to find a different way to fix this before this becomes a continuous problem. But finding teams, no. Getting mad at teams and telling them, hey, guys, you knocked that off right now. Well, you got to stop rewarding them, period. You got to make it to where it's not incentivized. And until then, the Jazz, in my opinion, now with the way things are set up, I think they at least have a vision going forward. How long that big picture will be, I don't know. But if you look at the rewards and the risk and all that, they're doing the right thing, like they are.
I'll repeat it. Yeah, I'll repeat it. Yeah, I'll repeat it till I'm blue in the face. And you just alluded to it. This is not a Jazz problem. This is a league problem. And it is, as you alluded to, it's the incentive structure of pro basketball. And it leads me into what a lot of people were confused about, and including Tom, who's a really bright NBA guy. Tom was with ESPN, NBC. He's now with the Blazers, and he's a great writer. Like, I respect Tom, but he's like, I was confused as to why they made the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade. Well, here's why you make the trade. The Jazz had a rip of cap space available at their disposal for free agency this summer. I will challenge anybody to go look at the group of free agents. In my opinion, none of them are even as good as Jaren Jackson Jr. And who knows when this opportunity will present itself again. Like 2-3 years ago, a lot of people thought the Memphis Grizzlies had this young core that would have something to say about the Western Conference with Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, and Ja Morant. And then Ja decides that he's unserious about his profession. They trade Bane last year, and then you go, okay, well, wait a second, what's going on? But nobody thought Jaren Jackson Jr. was available. Everybody thought that they were going to get rid of Ja and then try to start over around Jaren Jackson Jr. because he's only 26 years old. So suddenly, as a result of Memphis taking calls on Ja, apparently Golden State, after moving their attention away from Giannis, said, well, what about Jaren Jackson Jr.? And then they started listening to offers for Jaren Jackson Jr. So the Jazz capitalized on the moment to get a 26-year-old two-time All-Star as part of their future instead of hitting the market with their cap space to maybe sign a player who's not as good anyway. They make the trade, but it doesn't change their approach this year. So as the trade went down, I said on this show and in other places where I was asked about it, Jaren Jackson Jr. is about to fly to Salt Lake to learn that he has a bad back. It's not changing the reality of where they're at. But I also understand why they make the trade, because they capitalized on a moment to grab a player that they probably would not have been able to grab as far as the caliber if they used their cap space in free agency. I totally get it, Tony.
No, I 100% do as well. Well, and I saw your interview there on Channel 2. I thought it was terrific and love the insight and everything that you're bringing to the programming there. Yeah, at no moment when that trade was made did I say, you know what? If they can get hot enough, they got a real shot to get in the play-in. Like, at no moment did I say that to myself. And to your point, yes, they're getting better for the future. And this is a guy who I think has that defensive commitment you're talking about. When he was first drafted, I thought, okay, I think Luka's the best player in this draft, but I believed he was the second best one. And to be honest, I thought Jaren would be better than he has been. I thought he had like possible superstar level talent, and he's still just great. I mean, two-time All-Star, you know, and I think he can culturally start to instill. While he's only 26, I think he's definitely got enough years under him where he's got that veteran mindset. Great attitude, the professionalism. Now as you start to surge forward where there's an expectation that comes from contribution not being confused as commitment now, and I think he helps you move that direction. I think he's going to be a great fit with Will Hardy overall. I think a change of scenery is really good for him, and I think the surge can be upward for the Jazz. The problem is, you weren't able to do that in an off season. Instead, you had to capitalize on it now. So the timing is a little bit backwards. There's no doubt. But when you said that he's going to go to Salt Lake and find out he has a bad back, I burst out loud laughing because I knew exactly what you're talking about. You still have to stay to the plan in accordance. And it feels bizarre and it feels strange to say, yes, this team is trying not to win too much too often while also developing, getting better, and having a vision forward for the future. And so sometimes those things can be contradictory, but that is the situation they find themselves in. You can blame it on whatever you want to blame it on, but that's what they're doing now. The Jazz, but the thing for the Jazz is, what's the next best right thing? I understand that the previous years have not gone well at all. So what's the next best right thing? And I thought their offseason was good in terms of the way they structured their coaching staff. I thought they did a really, really nice job with a good vision going forward. And I think that this move was a good one. And I think that what they're trying to do in terms of not being too good so far this year, I think that that is the correct course and the correct path to go to. So I don't think the criticism of it, if you want to criticize it, that's fine, but I'm with you. You have to criticize the league. You can't just come at the Jazz and be like, show your integrity, show your character, do what's not best for you for the sake of saying that you don't. And it's like, no, guys, that's not how this works. And this is big boy business, and different teams have done it this way and have been successful. And it's not a good thing for them to go surge forward for 32 wins and then have it end up hurting them with their big picture goals and what they're trying to get accomplished.
So here's the good news. There is some good news laced in this conversation for players that have never played together before. And by as far as what I know, haven't practiced much at all. Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. in 2 games have looked awesome together. So Orlando, Lauri, 27 points in 27 minutes. Jaren Jackson Jr., 22 points in 25 minutes. And against the Heat, Lauri had 17 and 25, and Jaren had 22 points in 25 minutes. So, you know, we're kind of starting to see this thing crystallize. And with Keontae's growth this year and Walker coming back healthy next year, and, you know, maybe Nurkic has earned the ability to come back as a backup or played so well somebody grabs him in free agency because he's a free agent. There's certainly questions about all the other players. Like, I thought Filipowski would be better this year. I think Cody's high speed ahead to Europe. There's some things to like about Bryce, some shot-making stuff, a little Dennis Scott-ish back in the day for you older NBA fans. So when you look at what they have right now on paper, you could make an argument that they're really one puzzle piece away from, like, as I keep saying, cooking with gas next year. And if they can get a top 2 pick and added Darren Peterson or A.J. DeBonsa, all of this really would have been worth it. If that's the case, and this 4-year most atrocious stretch in the history of Jazz basketball is over at the end of this year, and next year we are front-facing and serious about competing, what does success look like next year, Tony?
Well, success looks like you finally have an identity that you can hang your hat on. You have a culture that people understand what it is. I mean, right now it's how can you really hold somebody accountable when the ultimate goal is not to win? How do you have a defensive identity when the ultimate goal is not to succeed? How do you create that? This is why I was really glad the Jazz gave Will Hardy that massive extension, because they needed to admit that he wasn't the problem. You have to admit that it's been elsewhere that you need to take responsibility. And props to the organization for doing that, because far too often they love to just kind of have a scapegoat in mind, and it very easily could have been, hey, it's not our fault. It's our head coach's fault here. He's not developing this and that. No, they had to own it. And I think it was evident whose fault it really was, and that it wasn't Will's. And so props to them for doing that. So what it's going to take now is you're going to have to come in and almost pretend like the previous seasons and the previous era is all behind you and start right from the beginning. And that can be really interesting if a player comes in and they know the big picture and they know that certain things are not going to be evaluated as stringently as others, for them to then flip into a different mindset and say, oh, no, this stuff all matters now. That's really hard, because, I mean, if those habits have not been instilled already, that can be a really, really tough transition. I always think back to the Dennis Lindsay era, and I thought he did a really, really nice job of problem solving. I thought he did a really nice job of early on detecting what wasn't going to work and moving on from it quickly, whether it's Enes Kanter not playing defense, whether it's Alec Burks not being able to truly embrace and embody possession by possession exactly where the ball should go and what should be going on at all times. This guy did a great job of doing that. So when you're talking about some of the players, Spence, you're right that they're not going to bat 1,000. So batting 1,000 won't be the key, and getting them all right won't be the key. In my opinion, success will come from understanding what isn't successful and moving from it fast, because the best step to winning will be eliminating the losing habits and eliminating the players that will not bring you to long-term success. So now as far as wins, losses, and all that, it goes into you're genuinely competing with an upward trajectory. So even if the win total looks mediocre, you can see that, during this massive window, they were top 5 defensively. During this stretch of play, this guy had better numbers than 80% of all-star players out there. He's an emerging all-star. Kind of what we watched a bit there in some of the early stages of the Rudy Gobert, Gordon Hayward era, and then Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell era, when it was handed off. So that's what it's going to be in that way. But it's going to be interesting to see when they go from, hey, we're trying to compete, we're trying to develop, but we're trying not to win, to, oh, yeah, we're all in on winning now. So this little habit right here is no longer a little habit. This is a disastrous losing behavior, and we need you to eradicate it now. And if there's a player who has had multiple years of saying, but I've never really had to think about that, and now the same person is saying, oh, yeah, we're now holding you accountable for this. This is where going from that previous culture into the next era actually can become very difficult, and it's an individual case-by-case situation. So a Jaren Jackson, I think, is a great guy to help you transition from that previous era to the next. And as you look at some of the young players, some of the draft picks, some of the guys on that roster who have even had positive contribution, it doesn't always mean they may be committed to the things necessary to be great someday. And that's where I think I'm excited for Will Hardy in the future when they finally cross that path and move into being fully aligned as an organization on the direction they want to go towards success.
All right, let's switch gears now. Let's get some college basketball thoughts from you, Tony. And your boy was in Provo on Saturday night. No big deal.
Yeah.
Hanging out, watching a little BYU Houston. My old man flew into town, went down, had some chicken, some ribs, some creamery ice cream, a flavored Fresca pregame. No big deal. Enjoy the No
If
cougar
you
tail.
have
No,
Cougar
I went with a creamer. I went with a creamery ice cream over the. Dude, that's like 6 feet of donut. I'm not taking that down. I'll take a scoop of vanilla with a little chocolate syrup and some M&Ms, and I'm good. But also, and look, let's start here. Kelvin Sampson is a legendary college basketball coach. Okay, he is a Hall of Famer. So Kevin Young is not the first, but Kelvin Sampson ran circles around Kevin Young. And Houston, seeing them up close, and they're here in Salt Lake tonight to take on the Utes, that's a national championship contender. Like the Kingston Flemings kid is going to be a top 5 pick. They've got size, they've got depth. They're dogs. They guard you all over the floor. And I understand how BYU struggles in a game like that. But if we pan back now, by my estimation, watching Big 12 basketball this year, I think BYU is probably the 7th best team in this conference. Arizona, Houston, Kansas, Iowa State, Texas Tech, probably UCF. And then you get into where BYU exists with a West Virginia comparison. They're trending towards a 6 or a 7 seed. And I was looking at this because I watched the team last year as well. I feel like the team last year, even though they don't have A.J. DeBonsa or Rob Wright, was a better, more cohesive unit and might actually even beat this team. When you look at the team last year, of course, Yegor is now in the NBA. He's playing awesome. They had a 37-year-old Trevin Nell with a lot of experience. They had Fus Traore, Dawson Baker, of course, Kay Bakeda. The Cannon Catchings kid, he's playing really well for Georgia, by the way. Dallin Hall, an underrated player, in my opinion, for them. Mawat Mag, and obviously they had Richie, who was their leading scorer. So the team this year, of course, on paper has more talent, but I think the team last year is a better group. And with the reported $13 million or so that BYU basketball spent on talent this year, added to the fact that Kevin Young is one of the top 3 or 4 paid coaches in the Big 12, if BYU basketball, Tony, is a 7 seed in the tournament and wins like 1 game, that's not good enough for your return on investment. So tell me what you think.
No, it's unacceptable. It's actually unacceptable. You could look at the Big 12 and you could say, all right, you lose to Arizona, Kansas, Oklahoma State, and Houston. I mean, that's life in the Big 12, folks. It's the way they're losing. The way they're losing to me is unacceptable because they go through big stretches or an entire game like the Oklahoma State game where they don't defend. And they're quite honestly a little afraid to get their hands dirty if you're going to compete at the levels that you're paying to compete at. Remember, you've invested a ton of money on a coach, a ton of money on players to go get the number 1 guy out there, and you can't, in the Big 12 or in this year of college basketball, and maybe now this new era, you can't be an offensive-only team. You can't go do it like Syracuse did it in 2003. You cannot walk out there and think, we'll just make this a make-or-miss situation. And if you're going to be 49th defensively in this era, this big picture, and in this conference, yeah, you're right. You're going to fall, and you're going to end up being something far away from any kind of contender. I thought BYU this year should have been a legit contender for the Final Four. And they have looked nothing like that in the areas that are most important. And especially lately with how poor they've defended, that's disconcerting to me. And they have some time to kind of straighten that out. But I'm very curious because it's rare that a team kind of goes from what they are right now defensively to then becoming elite in that department. And so, no, it would not be acceptable. It would not be good enough. And Houston's a contender, no doubt. Arizona, we got it. Kansas, by the way, last night, so impressed.
What a game, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, that like last night, I'm like, this is. I remember when college basketball was awesome, and this is exactly what it looks like. Like this is a really fun, and I understand that we know the circus that is NIL and transfer portal, and we can talk about that another day. But the product is outstanding. I mean, Michigan was fun to watch. Arizona, Kansas, Houston. I mean, the Big Ten has 5 contenders. The Big 12 has 5 contenders. Like, this is exciting, man. I can't wait for the tournament. And while we love Cinderella, I can't wait to see the big dogs in this Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, and championship. And so, anyway, Spence, the product is great, and the level that it takes to be elite, BYU is missing a piece of that. And it's glaring, and it's obvious, and you saw it. And even though they can contend with these teams, you're not going to beat them, and you're not going to get serious about being a legit contender until you actually get that fixed. And I think that it has been a lack of focus at times. I think it's been a lack of commitment at times. And I think they've been honest about it. but now they have to actually go do it. And I just, I'm not going to say they're not a good team because they are, but they didn't invest all of this to go to the second round. They invested in all this to, threaten Easter weekend, if you will. And right now, they just do not look like the team. They'd be a pretender as far as I would label them at this point.
Can we go one segment without you sneaking in a Michigan mention, dude? Like, come on.
I have to. It just, I'm sorry. They look so good on Sunday.
They're good.
And they beat Ohio State, and I was so fired up.
They're good.
When you said, let's talk some college basketball, I thought that's all we were talking about.
I know you did, but here's what I'll say, okay? Here's what I'll say after being down there on Saturday and watching this kid up close, man. Like, AJ he is all that he is cracked up to be. He looks like McGrady did at 19. They're built exactly the same. He's got to put on some weight, but McGrady did too. You go back and look at tape of Tracy McGrady, who came right out of high school. You're like, who is this skinny dude? And then once he put on some weight, he just became one of the best isolation scorers of his generation. I totally get it when it comes to what scouts see in A.J. DeBonsa. Tony, tell me what you've seen from him just as an individual player.
Well, just excellent. Everything is advertised. Anytime I'm asked about him by anybody else around the Big 12, I'm like, no, you wait till you see him in person, and you will not be disappointed. He had one game, I'm trying to remember which one it was, where I thought, man, he just missed shots, but those are all good looks. Right on line, a little long here, a little short there, halfway down and out. But his ability to get to the rim, his ability to explode at the rim, and then his ability to shoot, to create his own shots. The highlight tape will tell you everything. I like the McGrady comparison in terms of, the physical elements and his overall skill. And, he'll have to put on some weight, which I know he will. But everything about him, I was very curious with all this hype and all this expectation. And, I knew the guy wasn't a scrub, but I have been overwhelmingly impressed with, what he's been able to do so far and excited for his future. So I think BYU fans should be excited about what they have in a star player. Overall, they should be concerned with what they see collectively as a team defensively. But this dude, in my opinion, he's the number one player, and I can see why teams in the NBA would be losing to position themselves for a chance to pick this guy up when it comes to the draft in June.
I referenced that Houston is in town to play the Utes tonight here in Salt Lake. I'm going to run up to the game. I'll let my listeners know. You can hear pregame coverage starting at 6:30 here on the station. Then tip is going to be 7 o'clock. Houston is a healthy, I think, 17.5 or 18-point favorite. And, look, when it comes to my understanding is BYU paid more for A.J. DeBonsa than Utah did for their entire roster. And as the old saying goes, you pay for what you get. And I've talked about this all year long. I thought it would be better than this if we're going to be fair and transparent and honest. There just hasn't been growth. There are moments with both Terrence Brown and Don McHenry, good ball-in-hand guards that can score. And then Keanu Dawes had a good game at Kansas, but he's been a little bit up and down. You look at the schedule, and you're just like, dude, where are these wins going to come from? And I don't have the answer to that. Tonight could get ugly, Tony. So year one, Alex Jensen, Utah basketball. What's the take?
Well, I didn't expect greatness, and I think the staff expected a little more than this. And, Martin Schiller was pleased with a lot of positive things the other night overall, but Alex Jensen was very frank about what happened after the Arizona State game. And this team still needs to be able to go out and control what they can control. And I think that it is disappointing to see that not happen at times. I knew this was going to be an uphill climb in terms of wins and losses. But the biggest thing that they put their focus on here is establishing all the principles and all that, and then going forward with roster construction. So going forward, I think that they're really getting an evaluation of what kind of player they're looking for, exactly how they're going to fit with what they want to do. And then their off season is going to be immense, because I do believe that they will invest in the right kind of player when they feel like it fits exactly what they're trying to put together and what they're trying to accomplish. So I did feel like this season was establishing the principles, establishing the culture, and I do think overall they're ahead in that category. But I thought they took a step back in that against Arizona State. And it's interesting when February comes around, when people start to, in this era of college basketball, maybe think that they're moving on somewhere else next year, or that they're undervalued. I mean, there's a myriad of things that happen to different teams at this time of the season. But as far as that coaching staff, which is loaded with great basketball acumen there at Utah and a good NBA mind and how to manage a professional sports team, I think they have that. I'm excited for next year with what they do now that they've established this and how they insert players who truly fit what they're looking for. The amount of money that they'll invest, they don't have to go break the bank to get good quality players that fit what they do. But I know they'll be willing to invest going forward. So year one, I thought it would be a mixture of this. So I'm not overly surprised to see some of the results that we have. And, you're right. It could get ugly tonight. They don't have the dudes. And I knew right away they wouldn't, but someday they can. And so they put the structure in place. They've built the culture. Now this offseason is going to be so important to exactly how they formulate their roster and try to bolster their talent. Because, as you know, you can have a lot of the intangibles, but in the Big 12, you got to have dudes. And that's what they're going to need to do coming up in the this upcoming offseason.
All right, last thing, I'll set you loose on this. As we said goodbye to football over the weekend for about 6.5, 7 months until August, September. Rough watch, Seattle deserving for sure. Were you more entertained by the game or the halftime show that you watched featuring Kid Rock?
I knew you were going to say so. First of all, I love that you had your comments about all the ridiculousness of everybody fighting over which halftime was what the meaning was, which one was more valiant, virtuous, and oh gosh. I was like, I'm just going to watch the game and I want to enjoy the game. As far as the game being pleasant on the eyes, it really wasn't for most Super Bowls. You didn't have these fireworks and this back and forth. But as far as the schematics, and I know people love to bash color commentators, but I thought Chris Collinsworth had a great game when really diagnosing what was happening defensively and how difficult it was going to be for the Patriots, kind of processing the game, thinking, okay, could New England minimize the damage long enough, hold them to field goals long enough, get one great offensive drive, get a field-flipping turnover, and squeak out some sort of 16-14 or 16-13 win. You just kind of had that in your mind as the game was going on. And once that start of the third quarter took place and they really couldn't move the ball, and you could see it was really, same song, different dance, I just thought, well, this one's pretty much cooked. I don't think New England can move this thing. And then it was just kind of a slow death, the whole entire thing. And what's neat is we've been spoiled with some great Super Bowls. That one kind of reminded me of one of them from our childhood where it just didn't really deliver. But Seattle was a terrific team and two great defensive coaches. And I thought it would be lower scoring, but I thought it would be close and tense. And instead, it was really a game dominated by Seattle. And, the NFL season as a whole was terrific. It just didn't have a great finish to it. And as far as all the circus and everybody complaining and arguing over which halftime, I really look forward to the day when we can just get back to enjoying some really good things that we have in front of us. There's some great things that are going on, and we just don't enjoy them. We take them for granted, whether it's, a great NBA performance. We take them for granted, whether it's, something like the Super Bowl. And I really wish we can get back to enjoying sports for what they are. Great competition, excellence in so many different ways. I mean, all the complaining about the Olympics lately, same thing. Can we just get back to enjoying greatness when we see it? Because that's why I fell in love with sports to begin with. And if I could give a shout out to what I have coming up this weekend, which is I'll be in town Friday and Saturday for the Elaine Elliott Legacy Night. And I can't wait to talk about all the wonderful journeys of Elaine Elliott and the success of those teams and how they competed and how she took a team that had no business being in the Final Four on the brink to the Final Four and nearly beating the national champion, and everything that she stood for to help build women's basketball and women's sports. And after she took over for Fern Gardner, I mean, that's legacy. And it's all the things that you can't see on the stat sheets and the scoreboards that, let her legacy be a success. So, coming up, I have the game Cincinnati, Utah, Saturday night, 5:00. Hope fans can make it out. $5 tickets. Come out for a memorable night where we don't have to complain about something. We can just sit and enjoy great competition and appreciate great success from an amazing individual and a terrific program. So, football comes to an end, and I thought it was marred that whole night. I thought you pointed it out very well on Channel 2. It was marred by people puffing out their chest and arguing horrendously over which halftime show had more virtue to it or which one had, I don't know. I didn't even watch it. I didn't watch either halftime, to be honest. I started building out some of the roster details for Cincinnati women's basketball, and I enjoyed that much more.
Well, Tony, as a wise man once said, ba with the ba, da bang, diggy, 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 said the boogie, said up, jump the boogie. All right? Appreciate the time, bud. We'll see you soon. Be good, okay?
Hey, I look forward to it, man. Thanks for having me as always.
All right, Tony Parks. We'll catch a break. Don't forget, 4 o'clock hour today is Max Brown and Bill Riley, but we'll kind of reset coming up on the other side, get you up to date on the topics of the day today. Tuesday Drive. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Yeah. Do we have access to any live, Dave, in there? Do we have any access to any live shows?
Christmas song.
Oh, that one's all right. Because if we really want to get going on the show, if we want to get the energy up, you need to get like live at Central Park, maybe a little gorge action.
The problem with some of Dave's live tracks is that they're
you watch your mouth, young man.
21 minutes long.
Well, we play the intro to the songs. Do you have the ability to play a live Dave song? If I sent you one, could you play it?
Yeah, we'll make it work.
All right. I can't stop looking at the lyrics to Ba with the Ba.
I don't think you're looking at them. You have that down pat. You don't need help.
I've got the intro, but now I have the lyrics in front of me. For the time bombs ticking and the heads that hang, all the gangs getting money in the heads they bang bang. Wild Mustangs, the porno flicks, all my homies in the county in cell block 6. This grifter, dude. Ba with the Ba. All right, Porter. You asked for the airtime, so here's the deal. Tom Haberstroh, who I love, shout out Tom, joined us earlier with a very creative solution to a problem that is facing professional basketball. And the problem that is facing professional basketball is that a third of the teams in the NBA are unserious about competing night in and night out, including the one that plays here in Salt Lake City, Utah Jazz. That's one of the problems the NBA is facing. The other one is employees that, don't feel like they need to show up for work. LeBron, Luka, and Austin Reeves are out tonight against the Spurs. So Tom's solution was to do away with the draft and make pro basketball look like college basketball, where you just have the ability to recruit players to play for your team. Will that ever happen? Absolutely not. Is it an interesting angle? Sure. But you, young man, have been in the lab, and you claim that you have a solution for this problem that is ailing the NBA. The time is yours.
Well, I want to be clear. Like Tom Haberstroh's solution, it's one that the NBA owners would very much probably not get on board with. But it keeps the draft in play, and it incentivizes competition, which I think is important here. Okay? 50 games for your regular season. We're shortening the regular season. We're doing away with the NBA Cup nonsense.
Okay.
And the regular season is strictly for seeding and home court. What that means is that 32 teams are playing in what we normally call the playoffs. It's a postseason, but these are the best basketball players in the world. They're in the NBA for a reason. So all 32 teams are playing in this tournament. After one round, Spence, you have 16 teams left. You have 16 teams in call it a loser's bracket. Mm-hmm. Okay? The 16 teams that advance, well, we just have the normal playoffs now after round one. The 16 teams that lost, they're now playing four lottery balls. Okay? So you get away with the cup, you keep the draft, and you incentivize competition for both sides of this bracket, and you still get close to, depending on which team you have, you still get close to 80-ish games. A lot of teams are still going to play the 90-plus that it takes to win an NBA title. I don't know. I understand it's never going to happen, but if we already are looking at shortening the regular season, we're trying to create a tournament in the middle of it, let's just have a tournament at the end of it. And may not call it the postseason anymore, maybe call it something different, but I don't know.
Wait, because this is actually interesting. So are you saying that the 32 teams play a single game elimination tournament?
Not single game.
Not single game.
The first round maybe is back to 5 or 3 or whatever you want to do. You're not going to be playing 32, you're not going to be playing 16 7-game series in all likelihood. But I mean, you're also taking away 32 regular season games with the 50-game regular season. So there's still plenty of room to play a series for these teams that get in. And the 50 games is strictly for seeding and home court advantage.
Okay, interesting. So the 50-game truncated regular season is for seeding, home court advantage. Then all 32 teams are pooled into what is now the new playoff format. And then the 16 teams that win the series move on to the next round,
which is now just the normal playoffs
of the playoffs. And then the 16 teams that lose move into this other tournament and then play for draft positioning.
Yeah, and you're not the worst team isn't automatically getting the number one pick.
Yeah.
In fact, you're playing for balls in the lottery. You're playing for those ping pong balls, and the worst team doesn't get a reward for it. Now, the bottom 16 teams now have a flattened lottery odd that is given an advantage when you advance in the let's call it a losers bracket.
Okay. It's actually not bad. I mean, you wonder if teams would tank during this tournament to get into the 16-team tournament to try to get a pick, right?
Right.
But look, it's not bad because in a way it mirrors what I believe to be the solution to all of this, and that's promotion and relegation.
Right, and then
but this is kind of a form of that.
If you tank during a 7-game or a 5-game series in the playoffs, and that's going to be obvious too, we can still have incentive to not do that. Take away a lottery ball if you intentionally get in to that 16-team loser bracket. Like if you don't think you're going to advance in the top half of the league and you intentionally get into the bottom half, we're taking some of those lottery balls away. Or we're moving your draft pick to a place where it's not going to get the number one pick. I don't know. There's still a way to punish teams for intentionally moving onto that side.
Well, it's interesting because what it does do away with, so it would incentivize competing for the pick instead of incentivizing losing for the pick. So that's the solution that you come up with, which is good.
And every market is now invested into February, March, April, June.
Yeah, I'm trying. I mean, it's actually a really good idea. I'm trying to think about it through the prism of now you're asking players to play hard to draft a player that could take their job.
Yeah,
but I would run the risk of look. What's happening now is untenable. Okay. Your proposal and Tom's proposal, again, was interesting, and my solution has been promotion relegation. I think that solves all of this. If you watch the end of the Premiership calendar, when teams are fighting to stay up, those are some of the best, most intense matches that you're going to find. Now, the problem with that is the infrastructure of basketball in our country cannot support a lower league because, in my opinion, because of where college basketball is at right now, the G League is probably just going to die. It's probably just going to go away. And maybe you keep some semblance of it because it is, it's a way to get a player like Rudy Gobert minutes his rookie season when he wasn't playing for the varsity, as Gordy Chiesa would say. If you have a rookie second, third-year player that's not developing and sitting on the bench, you want to send him to the G League to get some minutes. Jason Tatum, by the way, practiced with the Celtics G League team today. So in order for promotion and relegation to work, the infrastructure of what would be a second-tier league would have to improve, unless at some point, and I'm just thinking out loud here, unless at some point college basketball goes the way of where I think college football is going. And if college basketball goes the way of college football, they're already signing G League players. They're already signing ex-pros. And if college basketball breaks away from the NCAA, like I think football is going to, the infrastructure for the lower league is there. It's college basketball. So if you have promotion relegation and the Jazz are unserious about competing and they're relegated, could we see the Jazz play the Utes or the Jazz play BYU? Like, this is a radical line of thinking, but the NCAA, for all intents and purposes, has been neutered. They're done. They can't do anything. They've been thrown out of court and called a serial antitrust violator. Go figure it out, which they haven't done. Most people believe college football is just going to be a pro league and break away from the NCAA and do their own thing. Could college basketball do the same thing and then just simply partner with the NBA to create this massive basketball umbrella where they're the second-tier league? Now, there are, I don't even, how many D1 basketball teams are there? I don't know. You'd have to pick probably the top 30 to 40 college basketball programs to be a part of this. But can you imagine the business opportunities? Because the other thing, and your model actually solves this, for anyone that always says, we have to shorten the regular season. I'm not saying you're wrong, but you're ignoring the business element of basketball, which is giving inventory to your TV partners. Like, you just remember during COVID, when we didn't have the NBA, what did we have? Remember?
We had a horse on.
We had a horse contest. Do you want to know why we had a horse contest? It wasn't because any of us wanted to watch these guys playing horse.
There's a contract.
It was because ESPN said, look, we need inventory.
Give us a reality show of NBA players.
Yeah, we're your partner. Okay, so every time I hear a talking head say, shorten the regular season, okay, that might solve some load management stuff. It might solve some of the players sitting out stuff. You know what it doesn't solve? The bottom line of the business of basketball. And you know what drives it? It's a business. It's a front-facing, revenue generation, entertainment business. And one of the reasons the NBA can just turn their nose up at anybody who believes they have a domestic issue is this is the second most popular sport in the world. So their global revenue streams are able to supplement any potential money they lose because you're mad that Luka Doncic didn't show up to play. And you should be mad about that. I've never liked that. So the shorten the regular season stuff ignores the bottom line business of pro basketball. But your model comes up with something where you kind of have two different, quote, postseason tournaments. And certainly with the pressure that would be on teams trying to play for lottery odds instead of lose in the name of lottery odds, it's much more compelling than watching Jaime Jaquez battle Cody Williams in the fourth quarter of a basketball game. It's pretty much an unwatchable product. What do you think about that? Promotion relegation. College basketball breaks away from the NCAA, partners with the NBA, and suddenly it's basically one conglomerate. It's one business.
Well, we're seeing NBA and pro players apparently sign and play in college now.
Yep.
So we're partially there already. I would try to, I don't know if you save the G League entirely, but maybe consolidate the G League a little bit, and your promotion and relegation maybe does save them in one form where the G League champion replaces the team that you mentioned that loses out on the 16-team playoff and then also loses out on the 16-team lottery. They're just that bad, right? The whatever the G League Ignite team is, they come up and play in the NBA after that, right? So we're already kind of partially there. I think that in the next few years, we're actually going to see, not in the form of the NCAA, but in the form of like legislators and lawmakers, do something about college hoops. So that may go away a little bit, but I love the idea of promotion and relegation. I don't love the idea of doing it with college athletics just because that's moving further and further away from what we love about college athletics, which I know holding on to is at this point.
Porter, don't be silly.
Holding on to at this point is silly.
You have been your mind has been co-opted. It was never real. I'm sorry, bud.
I know.
I hate to break it to you.
I know.
But here's before we catch a break, the issue with trying to salvage the G League instead of partner with college basketball is right now a lot of G League guys, it's like, hey, we're going to pay you $50,000 and here's a Chick-fil-A gift certificate, okay, when you're on the road. Whereas college basketball teams right now, it's like, hey, instead of making $50K in the G League, come play for me, I'll pay you $500,000. Right. They're going to, like, if they want the G League to survive, they're going to have to pay the players better than the college programs can pay them. Yeah,
as you mentioned, and as we've talked about, this is already kind of happening in some form or fashion. Like, the players that 10, 15 years ago skipped college basketball to go straight to the NBA, mm-hmm. There's a way to get them back into the college sport, and that is by doing what BYU did with A.J. DeBonsa, doing what Kansas is doing with Darren Peterson. There's only one way to keep that form of college basketball in its current state. And if you don't, and if legislators come down and do put limits on that, well, then college basketball is going to suffer. And those guys are just going to go from high school, maybe go overseas if the NBA draft still won't allow them in year one. And then they're going to go straight to the NBA. They're not going to go play at BYU. They're not going to go play at Kansas. So I don't know, man. There is a middle ground in sports right now, in mainly college basketball and football, that it's going to go one way or the other. And it seems to me like relegation would, I don't know, it would add an interesting wrinkle, and it would solve a bunch of the problems. And I don't know, we need problem solvers, because That's a common thing right now is problems.
What's your preferred method to cook a steak?
Put it on heat for like 10 seconds and then take it off.
Oh, calm down. Cast iron, baby. Do you use a cast iron?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do use a cast iron, but no, I mean I'm kind of being facetious, but not really. I sear it. I do it real quick, get it out of the butter. Very, very little actual cooking going on with the beef. If you got chicken, if you got pork, if you got, poultry, stuff like that, you got to cook it.
Are you watching all 22 while you don't cook your steak so you can eat it bloody?
Not recently.
Okay.
I've turned the football stuff off for the most part.
Well, here's why I'm bringing it up. Wasatch Wagyu is a new sponsor on the show. I got some New York strips from them. Cast iron, the other night, a few minutes on each side. So good. Okay, they're offering you a great deal to get some of their Wasatch Wagyu beef. Shout out to Greg and Stacy. Really good people. This is a local business, okay? It's premium Wagyu beef raised right here in Utah up in Heber. And I can promise you they gave Porter and I some beef jerky. It was awesome. Every cow is locally bred, very important, humanely raised, and the flavor is incredible. Marbling, rich, buttery taste. It's not grocery store Wagyu. This is legit stuff. They've got everything. Like I said, I tried their New York steaks, but they've got tomahawks, fillets, bratwurst, and a 100% Wagyu burger beef right now. And like I referenced, the beef jerky, I have it right here. I'm snacking on it during the show. Tons of flavors, no added chemicals, clean, high-protein fuel that actually tastes amazing. Now, here's the deal. Same deal they give Porter and I. Go to wasatchwagyu.com right now. That's wasatchwagyu.com. Use the promo code ESPN25 to get 25% off your order. Okay, it's limited time, though. They were giving us 10% off earlier. Now they're giving you 25%. ESPN25 is the code you use at wasatchwagyu.com. And if you're in Utah County or Salt Lake County, you get free delivery right now on all meat and jerky orders straight to your door. That's an extra $75 that you're saving by not shipping. So you get 25% off the actual meat, and then you save $75 with the delivery straight to your door, okay? So it's better beef, it's better fuel, it's better results. Update your grill game for 2026 with Wasatch Wagyu at wasatchwagyu.com. We got 2 hours down. We have 2 hours to go. Max Brown and the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley. That's your 4 o'clock hour. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Got the voice of the Utes joining us today. Bill Riley, the Utah men's basketball team, welcomes in Houston tonight. Houston is awesome. The Utes aren't right now. Hopefully that will change. But let's do some football. Our guy Max Brown on a Tuesday afternoon after the Super Bowl. What's up, Max? How are you, man?
What's up, Spence? Thanks for the Dave Matthews intro. Hadn't heard that song in a minute.
Oh, there you go. Happy to do it. One of my favorites, Northeast Boy, of course, as you know. But let's
There we go.
I always do, whenever I'm watching Sam Darnold, I think about my friend Max Brown because of your tie with him. So, reminder for our listeners, Max Brown once upon a time played quarterback for a school called USC, and as did Sam Darnold. And Sam becomes the first quarterback in SC history, not just to start, but win the Super Bowl. Max, tell me what you think.
Yeah, it's wild. It really is. I mean, I battled with Sam in the 2016 season. In that year, it was one of the bigger quarterback competitions throughout college football. And you fast forward a decade, and it's crazy. I mean, I'm happy for Sam. First and foremost, he's a great dude. Yes, we battled, and a lot of the media around our careers was kind of pitted, us against each other. But he's a great guy. Very much buddies with him. But it's funny. I was telling my wife the line that my football story to my kids and grandkids decades from now gets a lot better now that the guy that took my starting job is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. So selfishly, I'm here for it.
So I thought it was interesting, and Kyle Shanahan was on the pregame coverage, and I thought he's gonna, if he wants to do TV, he'll be awesome at it. And he made the point, when you're as good as Seattle is, and obviously as the Niners coach, he was not necessarily cheering for them to win. He said, when you're as good as Seattle is, you get to play by a different set of rules. And so a lot of people were talking about how, Sam didn't necessarily go for 1,000,000 yards. The last 8 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, only one quarterback has gone for more than 300, and that's Mahomes. But he didn't have a turnover throughout the entire playoff run and was clean throughout the course of the Super Bowl. I thought he did exactly what he needed to do, playing that position just to win the biggest game of his life. But you played it, so you tell me.
No, I think you're spot on. And it's funny, when I was watching the game just around my couch, we had some people over, it was like end of the second quarter, and someone looked over like, Max, what's going on? Like, why is this game so boring and so lame? And my answer was, I think the Seahawks and Mike McDonald, they realized midway through the second quarter, the Patriots can't move the ball. So the only way we lose this game is if Sam makes mistakes and we put the ball in harm's way. And so I think it was a conscious effort, I would imagine, in the headset from Mike McDonald to Kubiak of, hey, keep doing your thing, but let's not put the ball in harm's way. Let's not do the creative play or like the crazy trick play or anything like that, because it just wasn't needed. Like, the Seahawks, yes, it was only 9-0 at half, but the Seahawks had full command in that game. And so I think it's very much situational football. It's very much maybe a difference between NFL and college, where you're willing to win games in a grimy fashion. It doesn't need to always be big plays and whatnot. And that's a big part of Sam's game this year, I think. And even in Minnesota, of, hey, not feeling like he needs to be Superman, having support around him. Obviously that helps any quarterback, but especially for Sam, that once upon a time his label was a gunslinger. No one's saying that anymore. And I think it's because he has trusted the play calling and the teammates around him, and he doesn't feel like he needs to be Superman.
Oh, my gosh, dude. This picture of you at the age of 13 I just pulled up on your social media. Is that a Heward football camp T-shirt? That's you at 13?
You're the first one to notice the Heward reference on the T-shirt. Thank you. Thank you very much. But, I know this is a radio audio-only segment, but it's the Napoleon Dynamite haircut I had all of middle school.
I feel like you have no business having short hair if you can grow out a little fro like that, Max. I say let it go, dude.
I love where your head's at, the old 31-year-old age and the thinning going on. I don't know if that serves me well. Okay,
fair enough. I ought to be 31, man. I got a birthday next month, and all I'll say is this is the last few weeks I can say I'm in my mid-40s. I'm going to have to admit I'm in my late 40s next month. But let's move over here. It's interesting to kind of look at the landscape of what the Seahawks have and, what they have at their disposal to, retain talent or add to. JSN is up for an extension. My guess is you go ahead and give that to him. They've got some other players that, like Witherspoon, can be extended. But They've got the sixth most cap space in pro football. They've got Sam for 2 more years under a team-friendly deal. And Mike McDonald's 38 years old. Do you feel like this could be the start of maybe a, 4 or 5 year run where Seattle's going to have something to say about the thing?
It's a great question. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I was listening to Adam Schefter's comments yesterday, and to your point, yeah, Seattle's got a very interesting offseason with a lot of decisions to make. And John Schneider, their general manager, is obviously no stranger to making bold decisions. Yeah, the Jackson Smith and Jigba one is interesting because – yes, I know he had a big year, but do you put him in the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson conversation? At first glance, I'm like, no. But then if you're Jackson Smith and Jigma, stats-wise, you're saying yes. And so where does that conversation net out? And again, John Schneider has not had a problem, and he'll have more backing than he's ever had, strong-arming star players. A lot of general managers give in to the star players. John Schneider has not done that. He didn't do it with Richard Sherman. He didn't do it with Russell Wilson. Didn't do it with DK Metcalf. And, maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba, unfortunately for him, but maybe for the betterment of the team, that's a push and pull there. I believe Kenneth Walker's deal is up and or looming. That'll be interesting, obviously, with a running back as they get into their second contract. We often see that doesn't happen, or if it does happen, it's one that franchises regret 2 years into the second contract. Obviously, Kenneth Walker had a huge game there. And then defensively, obviously the Seahawks defense is lights out. But you went and got an aging DeMarcus Lawrence in free agency last year. Leonard Williams, the guy that I used to play with, he's the best teammate that I ever played, or most talented teammate that I ever played with. He's now into his 30s as a defensive lineman. The name you said, though, Devin Witherspoon, their nickel. I mean, that to me, just from an identity standpoint on defense and the versatility that he can do and what you invested in that for like top 5 pick to go get him at that spot. Very rarely do you see, a defensive back, or it's not common necessarily to see a defensive back that high. It speaks to how much they believe in him. I would imagine Witherspoon gets the max of whatever he's trying to get.
Yeah, that kid's awesome. I actually thought there was a case to be made. And the game was a little bit of a rough watch, so much so that I had friends over to watch the game, and we started debating whether or not you give a kicker MVP the Super Bowl. We started debating that. And ultimately, Kenneth Walker, 161 total yards, probably deserving. But I actually thought there was a case for Devin Witherspoon, who had a couple of sacks in that strip sack that led to the scoop and score because Seattle's defense was so good. But do you feel like Kenneth Walker was the right choice for MVP?
I would have given it to Jason Myers. I mean, the dude was 5 for 5, and I know it's a kicker. Don't get me wrong, and I know he's scoring points because the offense got him down that far. But I have no problem with Kenneth Walker. 27 touches. That's no joke. But I would have given it to the kicker. 5 for 5. I believe most field goals in a Super Bowl. Like give it to number 5.
What an unquarterback-like thing to say, to give MVP to a kicker, Max. I'm surprised.
I am the son of a guy who had a cup of coffee as a kicker in the NFL. As a flat-toed kicker decades ago, Mike Brown instilled a love for the kickers in my blood.
Interesting. Okay, let me ask you this, because I was digging in on some of just kind of the takeaways, reading some recaps. And the in vogue thing in pro football now is, and Utah fans are going to be a little bit stung by this, because when Utah played BYU this year, Coach Witt elected to go for it on 4th down multiple times instead of kicking field goals, and that ultimately is one of the things that cost Utah the game. Seattle, I read, first of all, they did not go for it on 4th down one time during the Super Bowl. They elected to take the field goals. And when Kansas City, through 2022 to 2024, the stretch where KC went to 3 Super Bowls and won 2, they were last in the NFL in going for it on 4th down. And Seattle, Denver, and I'm trying to think of the other team, Seattle, Denver, and there's one other team, the bottom 3 teams in just 4th down attempts this year were all in the playoffs, and Denver probably would have made the Super Bowl if Bo Nix stays healthy. So there's always the conversation, the age-old conversation about analytics against just what your gut tells you, or what the smart thing is to do based off of the time and score, or what have you. And Seattle had the ball in like the 45. They were up 6-0, and there was like a 4th and 4, I believe. And instead of going for it, I think Michael Dixon, what I read, is the highest paid punter in the NFL, and he just pinned him deep. So, okay, so it's the Texans, the Broncos, and the Seahawks, the bottom three in going for it in fourth down this year. So what does that say to you, football guy? The analytics say go for it on fourth down, and the teams that are kind of going the other way seem to be having a lot of success.
Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation. I did not know those stats. I guess my take here is, I mean, when you're walking through that, it screams the difference between NFL and college football, right? In the NFL, and you're putting Michael Dixon back there, you are feeling confident that he's able to pin them, inside the 5-yard line, which is what he did. And in fact, if it ends anything outside of the 8-yard line, you're frustrated. In college football, it's a absolute coin toss. And in fact, the expectation is that it's a pleasant surprise when you pin them deep. And I know Utah's had some great punters over the years, but as a guy who's, all around different programs every week in the fall, like the delta between college punters and NFL punters, drastically different. I also think it's different when you're the Seahawks and your field goal strategy changes based upon you have a lights out defense where, hey, I don't necessarily need the extra 4 points early on. Let me keep stockpiling 3 points after 3 points and put pressure on a young opposing quarterback in Drake May. And I think that's a different flavor. And then the other take I'd have here is, especially in college football, I think momentum's huge at any level of football, but I think disproportionately college players are impacted more both by momentum swings, both positive, right? If you go for fourth and get it, what that does for the psyche of a college football player, and then negatively, if you go for it on fourth and don't get it, like the negative impact that can have for your sideline. Versus, I feel like the NFL player is obviously a business. Players much more level-headed. I don't think there's the huge momentum swings in the NFL as much, which all those factors I think you have to take into account. And it's why, yes, these head coaches at both levels have these charts of, hey, when the score's this and that, it says either go for it or don't go for it. And it seems black and white on paper, but the emotional factors, who's on the other sideline, stakes of the game, what happened 30 minutes ago versus 3 minutes ago, it all matters, and all plays a role in these punt or go for it decisions.
So moving over to Drake now, obviously a hell of a season, nearly won MVP, led the league in QBR. The Super Bowl was the lowest QBR all year long. Led the league in yards per attempt, top 5 in rushing, most wins for a second-year quarterback. Like, awesome season for him. But ultimately, not good enough, no doubt about that. We learned that he had a little bit of a shoulder issue and took a pain-killing injection prior to the game. But he was also sacked 21 times throughout the course of the postseason, which is the most in the history of the game. So what's fair to say about Drake May and the criticism that seems to be coming his way? I did not mean to make that rhyme, just for the record.
He's got bars out here. There we go. What's fair to say? It's fair to say that the Patriots found their franchise quarterback. I think there's no doubt about that, and I think that box is very much checked if there was any doubt there. But I think the criticism's fair, where a lot of those sacks do fall on the quarterback to get the ball out of his hands quickly, and the quarterback in me, or quicker, I should say, and the quarterback in me is thinks it's always a fine line where you're top 5 in quarterbacks in terms of scrambling yards or whatever that stat is. But then you're also, tops in terms of taking sacks, which to me, those are correlated in that, when he is third and long, second and long, is he trying to do too much and always thinking that he can find the scrambling lane, which looks sweet when you're able to pick it up. And it's always a fun talking point by the announcer and all that. But then the downside is if you're always chasing that, escapability or pick up the first down, that leads to sacks. And that's obviously, what comes with the exciting plays comes with the detrimental drive stopping plays as well. And that's a fair criticism. And I think that's something that Drake has to solve for. And I'd be wary next year too, because, it felt like, and I know Jaden Daniels banged up and whatnot, but it feels like, just Jaden Daniels last year was, oh, wow, his legs, how dynamic he is. He's able to make extra plays. And then you get into year 2 and defenses kind of maybe figured him out a little bit. Like, does that happen with Drake May next year when you're getting all the defensive coordinators in his division being like, all right, we got to respect Drake May's legs. What is the spy package we're bringing to the park? And my point is, it would not surprise me if his rushing yards go substantially down next year as the league adjusts to his scrambling ability, which I think everyone knew he was athletic, but I do think there's an element of it took people by surprise this year, where you already know these coordinators are going to be in the lab to, especially for the teams that are facing the Patriots twice a year, to try to stop or design something to limit the scrambling yardage.
So let's a couple minutes left here. Let's dig into potentially what we could see next season. Seattle and the Rams are your early favorite to win the Super Bowl out of Vegas. That NFC West is just going to be a bear. And if the Niners can ever get health luck, they're going to have something to say about it. But in the NFC next year, of course, we'll see what Philly does in the offseason. I think the Bears have some things to build upon. If Micah Parsons can stay healthy, our old friend Jordan Love in the Packers might have a chance. We'll see if the Lions can rebound. But Seahawks and Rams, your favorite to win the Super Bowl next year out and come out of the NFC. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll go Rams right now, which I know is funny as a guy from Seattle, and the Hawks just won the Super Bowl. But I feel like the Rams have a very specific need heading into the offseason where any front seven or really any defensive free agent that's saying, all right, I can play some ball. Yes, I want to get paid, but I want to go win a Super Bowl. Of course, they'd want to be on the Seahawks too. But in terms of just where Stafford's at in his career, the consistency that McVay's had, all the star players they have on offense, the Rams, like if they address the defense, which I feel like they will, and that is a very clear-cut area to address this offseason. Like they're with everything they have on offense, they're the team to me, NFC wise and NFC West wise. It's the team to beat next year.
Moving over to the AFC, before I ask you for your conference-wide pick, I said for about 3 or 4 years after Durant left Golden State, I said, I'm not going to be the one that says into this microphone the Steph thing is done, okay? I'm not going to be that guy because after watching just how special he has been, continues to be, quite frankly, I thought there was a little bit left in the tank, and they actually won a title after Durant left. And I'm not going to be the guy that says into the microphone, Andy Reid, the Kansas City Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes are no longer relevant in professional football. But what's an expectation for you or from you for Kansas City next season?
Yeah, my wife's a huge Swiftie and was just asking me yesterday, does Travis Kelce come back? And my answer was, I wouldn't be surprised if he hangs him up. And forgive me if he's already announced something that I missed. But I feel like that's another question that the Chiefs are going to have to address, or at least an offseason headline that'll be there. I mean, the reality is Mahomes is the best quarterback of my generation. So similar to the narrative around Tom Brady, where you're never going to count him out, and you'd like to think they're always going to be in the hunt. And if they're not, like this year, that's a rare one-off. And I know Mahomes is going to have to battle back from the injury, but I book it in my brain, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, that the Chiefs are very much going to be a player. And that's why if I'm a Broncos fan, or even a Bills fan, obviously as well, this was the year to capture the AFC. This was the weakest AFC playoff run, in my opinion, in the last decade or so, in terms of you didn't have this surefire Hall of Fame coach and or quarterback that's been knocking on the door representing the AFC. You had a young Patriots team that only won 4 games a year ago. So this was the window there. And, I'd expect the Chiefs, assuming Mahomes can get healthy, to be in the equation. And I imagine I have a hard time believing that, the Ravens and the Bengals will both be, not necessarily in contention next year. And then obviously the Bills, to me, yes, I know they're making a coaching change, but they'll be in the back and right back in the thick of things as well. Excuse me.
All right. When you go over the macro viewpoint of the AFC, I think the Broncos might be your No. It's the Bills, then it's the Broncos, I believe. And for years, Max, I always said about Aaron Rodgers. I said, man, that dude feels like he's just way too talented to never win a Super Bowl. Then he got one. I just felt like he was so good that he was going to get multiple. But look, getting one, of course, is a great accomplishment. And I feel that way about Josh. I think at some point, Josh Allen is just too good. I know they made a coaching change. We talked about it last week. But AFC, big picture, who do you like and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't feel as strong about the AFC as I do NFC in terms of the Rams, in terms of like right now, February, looking ahead. If I had to put my money somewhere, I'd go Bills. I would, for the reasons you laid out. The team that keeps coming back to me, though, the Chargers are fascinating to me. Just in terms of Herbert now no longer being a younger guy. You got Harbaugh has already established that identity. You got Mike McDaniel coming in there to potentially add more creativity and explosiveness in the offensive game. If they can get one or two more pieces, that Chargers are intriguing to me. But if I had to put my money somewhere, I agree with you. I'll go Josh Allen and the Bills just because they're always knocking on the door.
Max, you're the man. Appreciate the time, buddy. Hope all is well. Be good. Travel safe. We'll get you back soon, okay?
Likewise, Spence. Thanks, man.
All right, the great Max Brown played quarterback at USC and then lost his job to a guy named Sam Darnold and then transferred to Pitt. And now he's one of my favorite college football analysts. We got to know him during the Pac-12 Networks days. Get him on Twitter at MaxBrown4 is where you find him on social. Posts a lot of good stuff. All right, we'll catch a break. Coming up next, The Voice. That's right. The voice of the Utes. Bill Riley is our guest on this Tuesday afternoon. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, before I welcome in my next guest, got to let you know, Stained. Listen up, kids. Stained is coming to the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater on October the 7th. But hold on. With Seether, Hoobastank, and Hinder. Tune in to the Sean O'Connell Show at 12:10 for your chance to score a pair of tickets. More details can be found at ESPN700sports.com. Our next guest is the voice of the Utes and the unofficial president of the Hoobastank fan club here in Salt Lake City. He is Bill Riley. Hello, Bill. How are you, sir?
Spence, what do you say you and I get a pair of tickets, head out to the Credit Union Amphitheater, and take in a little Seether and Stained?
Bill, as much as I love you, I think I'd just rather go get dinner. All due respect, if that's okay with you. How are you, bud?
Fair enough. I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good. I got to know how the trip back to the motherland was. I mean, look, Kansas, Arizona last night was just an awesome college basketball game. That's a really good team. And Utah fought hard. One of the better games I've seen from Kiana Dawes all year. But that's where you're from. What was it like to be there calling a game?
It was really cool, Spence. I got to go back. It was the first time I called a game in Allen Fieldhouse since I was a student. So I'll let you do the math. It's been a while because, as you've reminded me through the years, I'm old.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really, really cool to go back in my role. There's still a lot of people back there that I know and got a chance to see and run into. My best friend was back visiting his son who goes to school there. I got to see my nephew who goes to school there. So it was a lot of fun. Sean Mooney's first trip back to see it, and Sean's such a college basketball fan. Get to see him at Allen Fieldhouse, and then maybe the coolest part of all, Spence, I was meeting some friends after the game for dinner, and one of my friends, an old professor, went and grabbed my broadcasting mentor, who's 91 years old and in an assisted living home, and surprised me. He showed up to dinner, and I got to catch up with him. So it was a fun trip. I wish we got to call a win, but it was fun to be back and see a lot of people that I've known for years.
That's very cool. Do they still call you by your college nickname? I believe it was the Dorfman, right? Weren't you the Dorfman of Kansas back in the day? Didn't we establish that?
I was Dorfman. I was a legacy at the Teak House, and yes. I was Dorfman.
Love it, man. Well, I'm glad you could get back there, and yeah, hopefully better days ahead. And before we get to tonight, I mean, your boy was in Provo last weekend, Riles. I saw BYU Houston up close. Little chicken ribs, little creamery ice cream. I had a flavored Fresca. It was a lovely experience. So I saw Houston. Up close last week. We'll get to them in a minute. But just macro viewpoint as of now, look, you can't really call it any other way than what it actually is. I thought it was going to be a little bit better. I thought we would see a little bit more progress. I know we're missing, 3 or 4 rotational pieces that Al was relying on. But as somebody who's there in the building calling these games, are you seeing things at least kind of trending in the right direction, even though the wins have not come yet?
They're playing hard. When they're dialed in and decide to play a little bit of defense, they're pretty good. You saw that for stretches in the Kansas game on Saturday. KD maybe had his best game of the year. Terrence Brown, who's not been, he's been a scorer primarily, was doing his best to try to play some defense. Overall they're missing some pieces to be able to compete at the highest level in the Big 12. So I think right now a lot of it is still with Al. What he's trying to do is instill that culture, get his mindset and his philosophy in place, what he wants moving forward, and then figure out, because that's the most important part in today's day and age, who wants to be part of this thing moving forward? Who wants to be part of this? Year one's hard no matter where you're at. I was talking to somebody today, and they know that too outside the program. But, I think right now you're focusing on the process of getting what you want and finding out who wants to be along for you for the ride next year and beyond. So I think there's some good pieces there, some things that they could build around. But overall, to your point, it's been a little bit of a tough season.
Tell me how Al seems to be doing. I mean, I'll tune in for the post-game stuff with you guys and then watch, what I can on the news or on YouTube. And look, it's no surprise. I mean, coaches just age. JJ Redick, in 2 years coaching the Lakers, like his hair is gray now, dude. I was watching the Laker game last night. It's wild. And so it's not rare for a coach to look tired. Like I always used to joke, February Quinn Snyder, after the Jazz were on a road trip and they weren't playing well, looked like he was just going to, go postal on somebody because he hadn't slept in a week. You can tell that it's wearing on him. You can tell that none of these guys like losing, but he's looking tired, and I would imagine that he is. How do you think Al's holding up?
I think he's doing okay. I mean, I think realistically, coaches know what you have and what you're working with. I think he's frustrated probably with the losing. Remember, Alex Jensen didn't lose a game in the Huntsman Center in his entire playing career. Now, he knew that wasn't going to be the case this year. But I think the losing, I think he's still a competitor down deep, so I don't think the losses sit well, and he's very quick to say there's no moral victories. But I think I think you're at the point now where kind of what I was saying a minute ago, you're trying to just get your culture built in year one and figure out who you can build around moving forward, because that's going to be the important part. Year one, yep. It's 2/3 of the way done, but now you've got to figure out how do we proceed in year two. And I think the easier part of that now is Al's able to focus on the basketball part of it and the players and the guys he's coaching, because he's got Wes Wilcox, a GM, who's working on roster construction and looking for roster builds elsewhere for next year and pieces that they need to get better. So he's not dealing with a lot of the things maybe coaches dealt with in years gone by in college. You're dealing with the basketball and building your culture and then worrying he's got a personnel man and a general manager that can worry about the roster and looking at things moving forward. I think Al's is really focused with his guys trying to get this thing better now and seeing how they could build it moving forward.
All right, let's dig into tonight a little bit. As I referenced, I was at the BYU Houston game the other night, and when you see Houston up close, and look, Kelvin Sampson is a legend. He's a college basketball coaching legend. Had some great teams at Oklahoma, and so I'm not really saying this to be disparaging to Kevin Young, but Kelvin Sampson ran circles around Kevin Young and Provo. And they've got, I don't know how many pros they have. They might have 4. And certainly they've got a freshman guard who's going to be a top 5 pick in Kingston Flemings, who's incredibly impressive. They give you nothing. And what I love about them, they didn't blitz AJ. They didn't gap him. They made him beat his defender one-on-one. It's like Jerry used to say, GYFM. I'll leave the F out, but guard your bleeping man. Like, they go man. They're suffocating. You get no space at all. And BYU's pretty ISO heavy this year. If it's not AJ or Rob Wright III, they struggle. They don't move the ball the way they did a year ago. But Houston lines up across from you and says, we're going to make you beat us individually. And their defense is insane. They're physical. They're deep. I think they're an 18-point favorite tonight, 17.5. So how does Utah, how do they rise to this challenge tonight to, let's say, make it interesting in the second half?
Well, you've got to be able to deal with Houston's pressure. And like you said, they may not press you full court. They may not blitz you, but they'll just get up in your shirt. What I love about Kelvin Sampson, Spence, is he's a throwback. He's from a different era. He's been coaching 36 years. And, it's kind of, you become us, we don't become you, which is a rare thing in today's world of college basketball. He's not going to bend who he is. And these kids, and he's got good ones. He's not just finding kids and developing them. Kingston Fleming, who you just mentioned, a kid could have gone a lot of places. They've got a lot of guys that they could have gone. The other interesting thing about that program, Spence, is nobody transfers out. They've had like 2 transfers in the last 4 or 5 years, and they weren't guys that were playing guys anyway. It's pretty amazing what he does, and those kids have bought into it, and they take hard coaching because Kelvin Sampson, you watched him probably Saturday night. He will coach you hard. So I have a lot of respect for what they do. They might be the best team in the conference. Who knows? Arizona got beat last night. I thought they were the best. I think you can make a case for 3 or 4 teams, but Houston's on that very short list. Utah has to deal with their pressure, Spence, their on-ball pressure. You cannot get sped up by what they do, and Utah also has to be able to rebound. Houston is a really good rebounding team. Utah has been at times, at other times they have not. But if you cannot rebound, especially defensive rebound if you're Utah, because one of the things Houston does well is they send guys to the glass, and they get second and third chances. So Utah's going to have to be good on the defensive glass and deal with Houston's pressure in the full court and the half court.
We had Sean in studio last week. First of all, what a lovely guy. I'd never had a chance really to spend a ton of time with him. It must be fun to be able to call games with him. And I asked him this question because look, one of my issues with this team, and it's really un-Alex Jensen-like, is that just it's not analytics, it's not numbers. It is, do you have the force, toughness, and physicality to handle Big 12 basketball? And so many times I'm watching these games, and they're getting their ass kicked physically. This is the wrong team to shirk away from contact. You have to lean into it. So I asked Sean, can you coach having just that dog? Can you coach it? And I honestly don't know that you can. I think it's either in you or it's not. If they shirk from physicality tonight, Bill, they're going to lose by 1 million. I mean, these are grown men. And as you reference, like Emmanuel Sharp, Milos Uzan, they've got experienced players. They've got, the freshmen in Kingston Flemings. And then they've got 4 or 5 dudes between like 6'8" and 6'11" that just want to punch you in the mouth. Okay, so when it comes to embracing that contact, embracing this physical fight that you're in for, have you seen enough that to you that will indicate that they're at least up for that?
At times, yes, Spence. The second half against Arizona. Now, the problem was they took those punches in the first half, found themselves down 18. They played Arizona dead even in the second half. Saturday, for large chunks of that game, Kansas couldn't pull away from Utah. They got it up to 16, but couldn't pull away. But the crowd never really got into it because and Kansas can get physical with you too, with Badunga and Tiller and some of those guys. So what they have to do, though, is you can't play tough and physical for half the game or a third of the game or even 2/3 of the game. If you want to be in it against Arizona and Kansas and Houston and Texas Tech, you've got to match it for 40 minutes. So that's going to be the real key. And I agree with you. I think coaches can bring the dog out in you, but you can't instill that in people. You either have that fight in you or you don't. And games like this tonight, you kind of find out pretty quickly who's got that fight and who doesn't.
All right. Let's do a little football before I say you lose. So, as you referenced, Keanu Dawes had a really good game against Kansas, and typically it's been Terrence Brown and Don McHenry kind of making miracles happen in order just to keep them close. And Terrence in particular had a really rough, 2-game home stretch with OK State and Arizona State. But he's, when he's going, he's tough. I mean, he's a tough cover. If I take Terrence Brown and Don McHenry and Keanu Dawes off the table, you cannot answer with any of those three. With the rest of the group, there are moments with the Traore kid. Kendall had some moments against BYU. And maybe I don't know if we're close to getting Lucas Langarita back. I can't wait because in 5 minutes against BYU, I was like, hold on a second. There's something there. Okay, there's something there with that kid. I want to see him play more. But if I take TB and Don and Keanu Dawes off the table, who's the guy that if they can get, 12 to 15 points from him, then that's going to make a difference if the other three can just be who they are?
Well, I would say Seydou Traore, just because he's a junior. He's played high-level Big Ten basketball at Iowa, and he's shown at times this year he can go for that. I really like Kendall a lot. I think Kendall Sanders, to your point, got a little dog in him. Down at the BYU game in Provo, there was a little pushing and shoving. He didn't back away from it. He stepped up and played hard. He's a freshman, and he's kind of learning his way. I like him moving forward. But if you're talking about tonight, who that fourth guy is, I think it's got to be a guy like Seydou Traore just because he's played a lot of basketball, and he's played against teams like this before and should be ready for that challenge. So I would say Seydou, and he's also had games where he went for 15 and 18 points. So, Dawes, Brown, McHenry, they have to have good games. But that fourth guy for me, at least in a game like tonight, because of the high-level play, is probably Traore. At
the risk of having you go Andy Ludwig on me, I will ask you if Lucas Langarita is getting closer to coming back.
Is there a connection here, Spence?
Oh, man.
I'm starting to lose you a little bit.
You do realize he never came on my show once after that. You understand that?
I know. He's shooting around.
Okay.
I asked Al about him last night on the coach's show, and he said he's making progress. He's out there. If you go to the game tonight, you'll probably see Lucas, warming up with the guys and taking shots. But they're not rushing him. I mean, it's right now. It's a 9-14 season. You're not going to be a tournament team this year. They want this kid to be a part of what they're doing moving forward. So I don't think that they're rushing anything back. So I know he's making progress. Al said it on the coach's show last night. And if you get there, when the doors open tonight, he'll probably be out there getting some shots up and things. But I don't have an ETA as to is he back against Cincinnati or West Virginia or wherever that might be. But I do know he's making progress.
At the risk of creating incredible buzz in the building tonight, you should know that your boy will be in attendance.
Wow.
I know.
Really?
Yeah. I'm rolling up.
Like a part of the Kelvin Sampson fan club. This is back-to-back Houston games.
Well, I mean, there's a rumor. Look, I want to be clear. This isn't coming from me, but did you see the Devin Dampier video where he announced his returning?
No, I did not.
Okay, well, I'm heavily featured in it, and a lot of people in the community, again, I don't want credit. I'm not asking for it, and this is not coming from me, but there are people that have indicated that I am kind of the main reason that Devin decided to come back, and so there's a rumor that tonight I might be inducted in the Ring of Honor. I don't know. I'm just going to come and see what happens.
Well, I heard that they might be putting your Sigma Chi pledge number in the rafters right up next to Van Horn.
Oh, so you've heard the same rumor. Look, again, I don't want the credit, okay? Like some people are using the term like GOAT and legend. It's uncomfortable for me. But anyway, I will be there tonight. Can I get a high five from the voice of the Utes?
You can get a high five from me, and I can get one from Sean Mooney for you as well.
Perfect. Okay, so let's do a couple football things before I say you lose. Nothing of note has been released with Utah football since you and I last spoke, but there was the news that Devin Dampier actually had surgery on a sports hernia that he suffered during the third week of the season. And it's like, wait, what? It just underscores how tough he actually was when a lot of people were questioning how healthy he was. And we could see it in the games where the injuries were obvious. But looking back, Riles, this kid played with an injured sports hernia after week 3 of the season. I mean, that has to say a lot about just how committed he is to Utah football.
And why his teammates love him, Spence. They loved him from the moment he stepped on campus. They loved him last fall, too. And honestly, and let me just give a quick plug here for my podcast, Crimson Corner. I talk a little football this week. I also, by the way, have a local favorite, Johnny Bryant.
Nice.
Joining me, associate head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, former Jazz assistant, and, of course, Ute great will join me a little bit on the podcast. But I talked about what you were just talking about, Devin, and his toughness last year, and why I think Utah, as much as there's talk about Texas Tech and BYU, I think there's a chance both those teams could slide back a little bit. Not a lot. They'll both be really, really good teams. But I don't think that there's going to be a big difference this year between Utah, BYU, and Texas Tech in the Big 12. I think those are the best 3 teams. Utah went 11-2 with a Devin Dampier who was playing hurt much of last year. And if you keep Devin upright and healthy this year, and he makes the type of strides he made from New Mexico to Utah, if he takes that in another year, I think you're looking at a guy that might be the best quarterback in the Big 12 next year. So yeah, it's really shows, and again, that it just goes to show sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and fans maybe feel a little bad now about getting after the guy. Yeah, he was playing hurt, as most football players do, but he might have been playing more hurt than most.
I don't have the official date for spring football. Of course, the Super Bowl last weekend. Now we bid goodbye to football for about 6.5, 7 months as far as games being played. But obviously, with the popularity of both college and pro football, it's become a year-round topic, and it will continue to be on the show. Last year, Riles, I think it was March 20th. Is that about what we're looking at for the start of spring ball for Utah?
I haven't been told an exact date yet either, Spence. I think they're still trying to finalize that date, but yeah, probably in that neighborhood, mid-March. It's usually there was times that Kyle started before spring break, and then they took a week off, then got back after it. I don't know what Morgan's plan is, but I would say mid-March is probably in that right neighborhood. And then they'll go all the way through for a month and then conclude things in mid-April sometime probably.
Okay, you can go any direction you want, or maybe a couple of names, because the newcomers, the transfer portal, the high school kids coming in, it's just tough because a lot of them are from smaller schools, and that's proof of concept. It's how Utah football is built. It's an avenue that has bred success. But now that you've maybe had a couple of weeks to kind of digest what this new Utah football team will look like with these additions, do you have a couple that you'd like to share some info on that maybe we should know about?
I'll give you 3 newcomers that I'm kind of keeping my eye on this spring, and they're all mostly on the offensive side, but you can kind of watch them a little bit. One is Braden Pagan, the wide receiver, the kid, the Utah State kid who went for almost 1,000 yards with Bryson Barnes up there. 6'4", 210 pounds, deep threat. He's kind of that big receiver, speedy guy that Utah's been looking for, and he worked with Kevin McGiven last year. So I want to see how he and Dampier kind of put that relationship together. Then 2 offensive linemen, Kelvin Obot, the 5-star kid that played for Jordan Gross up in Idaho, and then the Montana State transfer, Cedric Jefferson, who I'm really anxious to see. He started on the national championship Montana State team last year at tackle. Utah's got a tackle void and hole, and obviously Obot is a 5-star kid who people rave about. So I'm curious to see if both those guys can step in and be difference makers this spring.
Before I set you loose, your side hustle is hosting the podcast that is sweeping the nation, known as Crimson Corner with Bill Riley. And as a proud subscriber, I know that you were able to sit down with a member of the Utah family who's new, and our Utah football fans who are listening should get to know him. Tell us what you learned about the new general manager, Joe D'Orazio, and where our listeners can go grab that pod.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get them, you can find it on the Utah Utes Athletic page as well. But D'Orazio is the GM now, and he's exactly what Utah football needs in this new era, Spence. Wharton Business School guy, analytics guy, has coached and played college football, was an Ivy Leaguer as a player, has coached in about 5 different places like, Utah as a grad assistant, Baylor, back east in some Ivies. He was also on Andy Reid's staff as an assistant and in the Philadelphia Eagles organization as well. He's a Philly guy. Our conversation was about 25 minutes long, just about his background, but also his vision. And by the way, he and Scally have been friends for about 12 or 13 years since D'Orazio was on the staff back in 2012 as a graduate assistant. So there's a real synergy between Morgan and Joe that is really interesting that I think Utah fans will get a real kick out of. And as I mentioned, it will drop tomorrow, but my latest episode talks some football, but my guest on this episode is Johnny Bryant. And I love Johnny. I've known him since the day he stepped on campus. And Spence, you know it too, but I just love his story. Starting his own basketball academy when he was right out of college and working at elementary school kids and then pros, and then Dennis Lindsay giving him a crack, and then he just took it from there. So great conversation with Johnny, too.
I realized last week when we were talking American Pie knowledge, I failed at the opportunity to cast you in that movie, and it's pretty obvious, Bill, you'd be the Shermanator.
Well, there's very little doubt that you are Stifler.
Okay, I'll take that one. I knew that would get you. I wanted a Bill Riley laugh before I set you loose. Look, I'll come by and say hi tonight. Have a good call, okay?
Thanks, Spence. Talk to you later.
All right, the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley. Utah welcomes in the Houston Cougars tonight. And look, I'm telling you, go to the game, support the team, and obviously the Utah men's basketball team needs as much support as possible. I'm going to go out on a limb and say there are tickets available. But if you want to see, I mean this with all due respect, if you want to see what I believe to be one of the top 3 or 4 most impressive college basketball teams I've seen in a long time, hopefully at some point that's Utah, but right now it's Houston. Saw them last week. I'm going to head up tonight. Would love to see you. If you see me walking around, please say hello. We'll catch a break. 5 o'clock hour of the program comes your way next right here on ESPN 700. All right, Drive at 5 time. Welcome on in, Tuesday afternoon style. Hope you're off to a good start to that work week. It's a little bit of a gray and chilly, rainy Tuesday here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. It's going to be a little bit gray and rainy all week. You're going to get some snow up in the mountains, it looks like. So, as it is every day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Happy Tuesday to you. Don't forget, we've got a big basketball game on our radio station tonight. Head on up to the Huntsman Center for a 7 o'clock tip between the Houston Cougars and the Utah Utes. Houston 21-2 on the year. They're 9-1 in Big 12 play. Utah 9-14, 1-9 in the Big 12. Houston at last check was a 17.5-point favorite. I saw them last week in Provo playing BYU. It's one of the most impressive college basketball teams I have ever seen. So it's going to be a tough one tonight for the rebuilding Utah Utes, year one under Alex Jensen. BYU in action right now. It's a homecoming for Rob Wright III, who signed a contract to stay at Baylor to play for Scott Drew, and then, of course, did an about-face after BYU came to the table with about $3 million. 7-6 early on. BYU has an early lead. It's a good night in college basketball. We've got a top 13 matchup out of the Big Ten, Purdue and Nebraska. Purdue's off to a 14-1 start. Miami, Carolina. Carolina just beat Duke. They're down 11-6 right now. Virginia's taking on Florida State. Vandy welcomes in Auburn. It's going to be Wisconsin, Illinois. I referenced Duke. They're taking on Pitt. A lot of really good games tonight in the world of college basketball. The Utah Jazz accidentally beat the Miami Heat last night. They are off tonight. I'll be back in action against one of the weirdest basketball teams I've ever seen in my life, the Sacramento Kings. Tonight's NBA coverage will be on NBA TV. Of course, if you're an NBA fan, watching this league is like the whole like twirling plates on your different plates and trying to balance that out. But NBA TV has a double dip. Clippers, Rockets, then it's going to be the Spurs and the Lakers, kind of. No LeBron, no Luka Doncic, no Austin Reeves. The Pacers and the Knicks at MSG, and the Mavericks and the Suns do battle. So Cooper Flagg and Victor Wembanyama in action tonight. We've had a busy show on this Tuesday. If you missed Tom Haberstroh from earlier, really good stuff. For some reason, the world of the national NBA media have decided to hone in on the Utah Jazz, who are clearly tanking. There's no doubt about that. But the Jazz are joined by my guess and estimate, Chris Mannix wrote on this today as well for Sports Illustrated, 10 teams in the landscape of pro basketball unserious about competing, but for some reason, people have decided to hone in on the Utah Jazz. So we talked about that with Tom today. A good comprehensive Super Bowl breakdown with Max Brown, and of course the voice of the Utes as well, Bill Riley. You'll hear from So I believe LeBron not playing tonight, and good night in the NBA and in college basketball tonight. Love that the college hoop season has actually been really good. I was watching Kansas and Arizona last night. Darren Peterson did not play because, well, high-level basketball game at Fog Allen last night between those two teams, and Kansas actually won without Darren Peterson. But, man, it's been a really, really, under-the-radar awesome start. Well, not even start. March is 5 weeks away from Selection Sunday. College basketball has turned out to be awesome this year. I think in a way, just like college football, the transfer portal and the ability to pay players has actually improved the product as much as people hate it. But I think missing the game tonight means LeBron's All-NBA streak is coming to an end. Just 21 years of All-NBA basketball. So, NBA's got an issue. We've talked about it quite a bit. No Luka Doncic. He's out with that hamstring. Austin Reeves is going to sit tonight as well. And they're resting Marcus Smart. I don't even know who's going to play for the Lakers tonight. Get ready for a heavy dose of Jake LaRavia if you're San Antonio. I would imagine the Spurs win that one easily. See a little Cooper Flag in action tonight. Clips Houston as well. And then Pacers Knicks at MSG always brings back some great memories. But the Knicks should handle that one pretty easily. I've not asked you about your thoughts on the – you've got something to say. Well, go ahead. What do you want to say?
No, I was just going to tease the show, but we can go.
No, I just wanted your thoughts on Utah basketball. Like I said, I thought it was going to be better. I don't see a ton of improvement. Tonight's going to be a bear, dude. This team is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help when you're playing in the Big 12 Conference, right? And especially when you have consecutive games like the ones you have here. Kansas, now Houston, Iowa State is coming up shortly. You had BYU twice in the last 6 weeks. So the gauntlet continues, and it's not going to look great for Utah. So it's important to kind of zero in on where are they getting better? Where are the positives? Where are the players that you can maybe look at being on this roster next year? Because it's just, few and far between when you're going to find W's in that column. But that doesn't mean you can't still glean some positive things. Like you, I thought it would be a little better, but year one, that's a tall task. You got to give Alex his time. I think, Spence, the real litmus is going to be recruiting. I have no doubts about Alex Jensen as a basketball guy, as an X's and O's guy, drawing things up on the sideline, coming out of timeouts. Can he get the guys in the room? And can he get the guys in the room with the resources that he is given by the University of Utah? That, I think, is still very much a question. And it's going to be the question that has to be answered by this program.
Would you like to recant the first segment where you admitted that if there was a fight and I was involved, you wouldn't get my back, therefore you're the Duncan Robinson of Sports Talk Radio?
I didn't say that.
No, that's what you said.
I didn't say that.
That's how the message landed.
Every brouhaha, every kerfuffle, every whatever you want to call it, has an instigator. It has a circumstance. And I'm not willing to commit to violence without knowing the circumstance.
No, it just underscores my point that you have a diabolical plan to take over the radio station. And if I was in a fight, you probably would hope that I was killed so you could host the show.
Okay.
Yeah, knew it.
If you want to feel that way.
Yeah, no, that's what it is.
I'll have your back in most circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. Say no more. All right, we will catch a break. And coming up next, Bill Riley, Sean Mooney, our guys are going to have the call. It's a tough one, man. Utah's taking on Houston. But, Porter, what comes our way on a Wednesday edition of the radio show?
Wednesday edition of The Drive. We got three guys all in studio going to take us through the entire afternoon, and three good ones. Well, two good ones. I'll let you talk about the other one.
Okay.
Chris Kamrani stops by the program.
That's good.
Andy Larson stops by the program.
Yeah, that's acceptable.
And Dave Fox in studio on a Wednesday.
We're obligated with that. I'll be on TV with Dave, I think, tomorrow night, 10:35 KMYU. I think so. I'll update you tomorrow. Anyway, we'll catch a break. Special thank you today. Tom Habershow, Tony Parks, Matt Brown, and Bill Riley. If you miss any of that sound from the show, head on over to the website. It is ESPN700sports.com. You can also download our mobile app. Take us on the go. Mobile app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store for free. And then finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon, for 4 full hours. Check out the podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, and give us all the stars. It actually helps out if you would do that. For Porter, I'm Spence saying good night. Have a great Tuesday evening. Coming up next, the Runnin' Utes take on the Houston Cougars. It's Bill Riley, it's Sean Mooney, so keep it right here on your home of the Utes, ESPN 700.